Welcome to the Township of Woolwich Council of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, April the 13th. Before we start, I will remind Council that this portion of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. I will also remind Council to speak clearly and project their voice when they are talking so people viewing at home can hear them. I will now do a roll call of Council for the benefit of the public watching this meeting. When I call your name, please wave at your camera and say here or present. I, Councillor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Mayor Shantz?
I'm here.
Councillor Martin?
Present.
Councillor McMillan?
Present.
Councillor Merlehan?
Present.
And Councillor Redikoff?
Present.
Perfect. We have a resolution that Council of the Township of Woolwich reconvenes an open session. Do I have a mover? Councillor Martin, and seconded by Councillor McMillan. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Councillor Merlehan.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I have a pecuniary interest on 7.1, the proposal to close Mill Street. The BIA and the Sip and Bite are both clients.
Thank you. Any others? Thank you. We don't have anything coming forward from closed session. No planned public meeting. We do have some presentations. This evening, Mayor Shantz has invited Chief Brian Larkin of the Waterloo Regional Police Services to present to Council. Mayor Shantz, was there anything you wanted to say before I introduced, or I guess you're going to introduce Chief Larkin?
I would be happy to introduce Chief Larkin. He's going to try to give us a Reader's Digest version of gun legislation and what it means, or in terms of violent crime and I guess and the community, the excuse me, the rural community. You know, as I was thinking about how to introduce the chief, and I know we've got a long agenda today, but I did look up his CV online, so I am going to take the time to just tell you a little bit about what he does, just to put things in perspective, to show you what kind of perspective he does have. And if I get it wrong, Chief, you can correct me when you get started. He's president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, past president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. He's co-chair of the Provincial Police Joint Health and Safety Committee, co-chair of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police Drug Advisory Committee. He's been involved in a number of local initiatives and communities, including Nutrition for Learning, United Way, the Ontario Police Memorial Foundation. He's been awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal and is a member of the Order of Merit of Police Forces. But most importantly, he's a resident of Woolwich Township. So welcome, Chief, and if I got anything wrong in there, please correct it.
Thanks so much, Mayor Shantz, and through you, Chair, Councillor Larry Shantz, and to all the members of Woolwich Council. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today to discuss some emerging and proposed legislation around Firearms Act. And I'm coming to you actually from the city of Cambridge. I'm currently not at my home in Woolwich Township as we try to bring good bandwidth. I do want to apologize. I did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation. I recognize that through the virtual world, much of you are having your screen shared and trying to follow along. But on February 16, 2021, Minister Bill Blair and the Government of Canada introduced Bill C-21, which is an act to amend the Criminal Code and the Firearms Act, which was rolled out in its entirety for its first reading Mayor Shantz and I, as well as other community leaders across the region of Waterloo, had an opportunity to engage in dialogue with Minister Blair and Minister Jagger to discuss the impact on the region of Waterloo, as well as our very diverse community. We provide policing services not only to urban centers, but the surrounding townships and our agricultural and our rural communities, which are very much different than our urban centers. We've been actually challenged within the region of Waterloo with increased violent crime and crime severity, largely with our connection and our tentacles to the Greater Toronto Area. And so there's much to celebrate within Waterloo Region and Woolwich Township. Our connection to the GTA with the 401 corridor and Highway 7 and 8 and Highway 24 and Highway 7. These are all wonderful things, but they also bring other challenges. Across Canada in 2020, and 2019, 2020, for a number of consecutive years, we've seen our violent crime rate increase across our nation, including in Waterloo. We've seen some significant impacts around crime severity. Not to the same extent in Woolwich Township, which we continue to see growth, particularly within Elmira and in particularly Breslau, which continue to be expanding and growing areas with much significant growth. But there is impact, and we do recognize that crimes and tentacles of addiction, that Woolwich Township is not immune to those things. The proposal of Bill C-21, I'd just like to take you through this to give you some insight, because you may be receiving inquiries from those that live within the township. There still remains gun and rod clubs within Woolwich Township, as well as surrounding areas. And naturally, there's a large agricultural perspective where firearms are a part of actually everyday, agricultural use. So it's really built into 6 pillars. The proposed legislation that is before Government of Canada is in 6 layers. The first one is around combating intimate partner and gender-based violence. There's a specific piece around also self-harm involving firearms, which would allow and create the opportunities for what the government would call red and yellow flag laws. These laws would allow individuals and citizens, concerned friends, family, relatives, other professionals, to actually apply to the courts for an immediate removal and revocation of an individual's firearm, or ask the chief firearm officer to suspend and review the individual license to own. Clearly, as we look at intimate partner violence across Canada, and particularly during the pandemic, it has been a continued growing concern. Reporting is, we're continuing to see increased victimization of intimate partner violence. But also we recognize that self-harm and the challenges of the pandemic has continued to amplify the impact of mental health. And hence, again, from our perspective, this potential ability to family, friends, and relatives and professionals to intervene other than simply the police is potentially a step in the right direction. The larger one, the second pillar, is to fight gun smuggling and trafficking. And it's really around increasing criminal penalties. It's also by enhancing and investing within the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Border Service Agency to combat the illegal importation of firearms. And some of us locally may question, okay, well, what's the impact on Woolwich Township as well as the region of Waterloo? Still, we recognize that almost anywhere between 70 to 80% of all illegal guns are actually come through our border crossings. And so, naturally, our connection and our proximity to the Niagara and Buffalo border does present a challenge into our network, as well as our proximity as we look towards, even the Detroit Windsor corridor. These are all natural pieces where we see the smuggling. And so no specific impact on our police service or on your services, but we do recognize that by investing in controlling the borders and addressing smuggling would be potentially a step in the right one. The third pillar is actually creating safer communities by supporting municipalities and to have the ability to ban handguns through bylaws, restricting storage of handguns and transportation of handguns in their jurisdictions. Individuals who violate these municipal bylaws would be subject to federal penalties, including license revocation, criminal sanctions, as well as other federal sanctions. This third pillar has a definitive impact potentially on the township and Woolwich Township, because it would actually provide the ability for municipalities to enact local bylaws, which would restrict and manage the use, the handgun, the use, the storage, et cetera, of handguns. Mayor Shantz and I both participated in a roundtable. This is one that does potentially create some concerns, and one that we should continue collectively as a region and as a township and as a police service to monitor. We recognize that handguns continue to be problematic, particularly in the Greater Toronto Area, as well as our region's not immune to the use of handguns in illegal criminal acts. But we also recognize that we have a number of gun clubs and handgun clubs where lawful and legal owners use them for sport and recreation, which is a part of their activities. And it potentially creates a little bit of a challenge, potentially, around really a staggered approach. And so, for example, if an urban center that borders Woolwich Township enacts such a bylaw, what does that mean for the township, et cetera? My recommendation to the Police Services Board is that we look at this from a regional perspective, but we also continue to advocate for a national approach and a national strategy versus really patchwork pieces. So Pillar 3 is one that obviously potentially directly impacts the governance and you as governors of the Township of Woolwich. The fourth pillar is actually giving young people opportunities and resources they need to avoid criminal and or gang behavior activity by providing funding to municipalities and Indigenous communities to support youth programs. There's a $5 million investment over 5 years nationally that our communities, Woolwich and or collectively with the region, would be able to support to combat particularly youth program, to implement youth programming that would combat those that are connected to gangs and or to divert and or build community justice centers, which would actually be aligned very much with our restorative nature of how we deal with crime. And in fact, Woolwich Township, and in particular Elmira being really the birthplace of restorative justice, we do see this as a positive pillar. Again, it's $5 million over 5 years across the nation our size. Again, potentially, I think Mayor Shaunce knows my position is we should be advocating for more increased and substantial funding to our community as we continue to grow. The fifth pillar is to protect Canadians from gun violence. And this would create and amend current legislation, which would impact depicting violence in firearms advertising, tighter restrictions on the imports of ammunition, prohibition of imports, export sales, transfers of replica handguns, as well as altering, magazines, etc. Again, a very progressive step where we see the proliferation within social media, within different streams of media where gun violence and guns are really promoted and advertised. The final pillar is the complete prohibition of assault-style firearms. And this would actually ensure that assault-style firearms, and there's a whole description piece, and I will ensure that the clerk's office receives links. So those of you that are interested in understanding a full depth of the legislation will be able to access that. I will do that this week. Would actually essentially, the act to amend the Firearms Act would render these weapons that they cannot be used legally at all. They can't be transported, they can't be sold, they can't be transferred, they can't be bequeathed by anybody within Canada. And the government of Canada would intend to move towards a buyback program once the legislation, and if the legislation was passed, to support the safe removal of these firearms from our communities. Again, from a township perspective, this may create some concern and some inquiries. We're not exactly sure what the buyback program will look like, although Public Safety Canada advises that there would be no impact on regional policing, that this would be done separately from any municipal police services and done in a separate piece. But for example, assault-style rifles would be similar to an AR-15, used in different venues, some used in sport and recreation. Again, likely potentially some challenges from that perspective where you may receive inquiries. And those are the key 6 pillars of the proposed legislation. It had its first reading February 16, 2021. We anticipate, and I anticipate as your chief of police, that this will move to committee for further enhancements, further inquiries. As all of you know, it takes a period of time to move federal legislation through the system. But it is something that your police service is keeping an eye on. We'll continue to stay connected to the Police Services Board. There are elements that will continue to protect Canadians and protect citizens in Woolwich Township. And there are other elements which will potentially, create further dialogue and community dialogue. I think the one pillar that the township should keep their eye on in particularly is the piece around municipalities having the ability to ban handguns. Again, a patchwork approach would create some challenges in the region. And I do know from conversation with our regional leaders, including Mayor Shantz, we did provide that feedback to Minister Blair, the public safety minister. And we'll endeavor to keep you connected. 2020 overall within the Waterloo region, we did see a decline in the use of firearms and the decline in the use of criminal acts, which is a positive step from 2019, where we saw some significant impacts. But again, we continue to see sporadic impacts of firearms within our community. And we're not immune to that. I think it's important for us to recognize that this is happening locally, provincially, and nationally. We continue to see this significant transition. So in a very brief nutshell, that's the nuts and bolts of Bill C-21. We'll continue to keep monitoring and updating through the Police Services Board, all of our municipal and township governors and leaders. And so I thank you for the opportunity. And it is great to see everybody virtually and wishing you well during this spring season.
Thank you, Chief Larkin. Council, do you have any questions for the chief or comments? Councillor Merlehan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Shantz, through you to Mr. Larkin, Chief Larkin. Yeah, thanks for the recap on the C-21. I had a call from somebody from a gun club, I don't know, a couple of hours after it was announced, and I didn't actually even know about it. So there was some kind of concern on that, and I'm glad to hear that the regional approach is that allowing municipalities to individually decide what restrictions would be placed on guns. Is the patchworkness is not really a good option, and I would say that's not a good option for across Ontario and across on Canada for people that are gun owners. Just the confusion of wherever you're going, there potentially being different rules. The other concern that was brought to my attention was airsoft guns and paintball guns, some of those recreational guns that could potentially be caught up in restrictions. I'm just wondering if you had any more information on that and whether or not those are harmful to the public at large.
Thanks for the question, and certainly gun clubs will be monitoring this. And I do want to reiterate, I think that we had a very strong collective message to Public Safety Canada that the patchwork approach was, in our view, not feasible, not logical, and that we think that there should be a national framework of peace. The good point on the replica guns, actually, it was in one of the pillars, and I did miss that. So there is actually and this really ties to my role as the president of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. 20 years ago, and almost then, actually, retired Chief Larry Gerville did actually advance a proposal that there would be a motion to manage and govern replica and airsoft and paint guns. And that was really around the proliferation of use in criminal acts as well as different pieces. And so in this legislation, there is actually a governance piece that would manage and actually a call to change the style, the look, the application of airsoft pistols, including particularly regulating them. I will tell you that it is becoming more and more problematic. So for example, 10 days ago across the region, we lost 20 GRT bus shelters, which were all damaged by replica airsoft guns. You can imagine that the impact on the citizen, the cost to repair, the cost to replace, but often we're seizing these on a regular basis because the replicas now are so attuned to real life, actual lawful handguns. And so Public Safety Canada, as a part of this legislation, does have a controlled section on this. We know that it is creating consternation with manufacturers that are involved in this business. This is not about actually limiting, for example, the ability for a paintball company. It's not about limiting the use of these types of processes, but it's around actually managing what they look like. Perhaps, for example, the color, perhaps where they're purchased, how they're governed, those types of processes. And I will tell you that the Canadian chiefs across the nation do support the notion of some governance around these processes. Tragically, most recently in the city of Calgary, a fatal shooting occurred. It was with the Calgary Police Service, and regrettably and tragically, the individual that lost her life was in possession of a replica handgun. And you can recognize that during these tense situations that, from a distance are very difficult. The manufacturing has changed significantly. So it is a concern. You're likely to hear that from those that are involved in the manufacturing and or the recreational business. This is not about the legislation and what we believe. And when I interpret the legislation, it's not about limiting the recreational activities or limiting the perspective, but there may be some governance, and the legislation does call for almost a regulation process around those replica airsoft and paintball guns. So again, through you, Councillor Schatz, to Councillor Marilyn, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you again, Chief Larkin, for your presentation to council, and thank you, Mayor Schatz, for inviting the chief to speak to council. And hopefully someday we can get your internet speed fast enough that you can do all this from home.
I wish you all the best, and thank you for your continued support, and more importantly, thanks for your amazing leadership within the township of Woolwich and across the region of Waterloo. Woolwich is a wonderful place to call home, and I'm proud to be a resident. All the best.
Thank you. We do have some 4 delegations this evening. Before we get started with that, I would like to remind the delegations of some guidelines for participating in tonight's meeting. Please leave your video turned off and your microphone muted until you are called upon to speak. You will have 10 minutes to speak to council. After you speak, please wait for questions from council. Once there are no further questions, please turn your microphone and camera off again. You may leave the meeting after your delegation is done. If you wish to remain on the Zoom call and watch the remainder of the meeting, which I'm sure you will, you are more than welcome to do that as long as you keep your camera and your microphones off. The first report is for the Mill Street closure, and we have Economic Developer and Tourism Officer Jenna Morris with us this evening to provide council with an overview of her report. Ms. Morris, if you may begin. You may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Councillor Schatz and Chair, and good evening, everybody. So I guess just to start, it's been another spring of crippling closures and pandemic-related restrictions for the industry. Just as things started to look good for our small businesses, we entered another at least 4-week lockdown. So retail, back to curbside, restaurants, takeout only, and as of yesterday, kids will be going back to online learning. So bills continue to stack up and loans need to be paid. Downtown businesses need foot traffic to keep afloat. At the very least, the closure of Mill Street last year saved Sip and Bite. It was done quickly, and both staff and the BIA recognized several opportunities to improve the closure, should council approve it, for this year. The main areas of improvement include improving its appearance and developing a communication and marketing strategy so that the public know and feel welcome to use it. This year's closure will not have pylons along the left-hand turning lane on Arthur Street, and trees and plants will surround the space. There will also be umbrellas, extra seating options, and the Sip and Bite wall is set to have a beautiful mural completed on it this summer. Signage and marketing will let residents know that they can utilize the area as a comfortable and safe place to eat their takeout or ice cream. It is important to note that staff work closely with the BIA board and businesses within the BIA boundary to assess several other closure scenarios before landing on the street closure again. Ultimately, the board felt the street closure was the best for the downtown as a whole. It provides a safe seating area just off of the main street for multiple food establishments to direct their customers. Lastly, the dates of the closure are dependent on the lifting of COVID restrictions. With that, I will wrap it up and open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, council. Any questions? Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Jenny, you talked briefly about the BIA exploring different options. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about that, about just how extensively the BIA looked at having patio chairs on every sidewalk possible, on having pop-up patios that took up parking spots? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on the depth that you went to with our infrastructure staff out there looking at options to only have parking spots closed, and just the amount of hours that you put in personally exploring different options?
Sure. Thanks, Councillor McMillan, and through you, Chair. So some of the scenarios and other options that we looked at, as per request from BIA, and options that staff and the region looked at, that could be an alternative to closing that section of the road, given some of the feedback from last year. We looked at closing a portion of Mill Street so that we could still remain the left-hand turning lane and some of that parking spaces, and rather make it a skinnier lane to drive through and pop out a patio from the Sip and Bite side. This was not feasible, as you couldn't actually safely fit a vehicle through there while bumping seating and a patio out onto the roadway. The other option we looked at was just installing pop-up patios into the parking stalls. These would require very specific engineering and building to pop it up and meet some of the regional requirements at the time. And even then only would fit a few tables and chairs. We also looked at just simply putting some seating options on the sidewalk, but not even a 4-person table skewed and put sideways would actually fit comfortably on the sidewalk. We actually tried it last year, and the chairs to the table that we set up, which, like I said, it was just a small square 4-person table, were hanging over the side of the sidewalk. So that wasn't safe either.
So is it safe to say that you exhausted all other opportunities? Is that safe to say?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? And I neglected to say that Councilor Merlihan has left this part of the meeting. So any other questions for Ms. Morris? Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Have you looked at the option of putting the patio in the parking lot behind Sip and Bite? Did you look at that?
Yes. So thanks for the question, Councillor Martin, and through you, Chair. We did look at that option, and we consulted with the BIA and the board, the BIA board and Sip and Bite on this. And the ultimate decision was that although technically staff could work to create a patio space just behind Sip and Bite, only for Sip and Bite felt that it wasn't feasible or appropriate to expect staff to walk through the front of the building around to the back with loads of plates and food from the front door. So essentially, Sip and Bite restaurant felt as though it wouldn't be an appropriate location, as it would be so far from the main entrance of the building.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Ms. Morris. Before we deal with the recommendation in the report, we will hear from the 3 registered delegations. First, we have Delegate Jason Devaney, TD Bank, speak to council. Mr. Devaney, please turn your camera and microphone on, and you may begin when you are ready.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Councilors and Mayor Shantz, my first meeting. Hopefully I addressed you all okay. So I've been with TD now for 20 years. I've been a branch manager for 13 years. I've been a branch manager in small towns like Acton, Galt. I know the importance of a branch manager in a small town. I embrace that role. I take it very seriously. Last year when the pandemic hit, contrary to popular belief, when I started in February, I didn't bring it, but we closed our doors on Saturday. We reduced our hours 10 to 4. We had big lineups at 10 o'clock in the morning. We'd have lineups throughout the day. I was the guy on the street, screening the customers, socially distancing them, but making small talk, introducing myself, asking them about their experiences with Elmira, with our branch, with COVID. It became very contentious later in the summer when frustrations started to boil over at the topic of the Mill Street closure. So tonight I wanted to provide you all with some feedback from our frustrated customers, and hopefully we can implement a plan that works for everybody based on that feedback from the community. The main 3 issues that came up consistently with my frustrated customers, number 1 was accessibility. So the majority of our customers drive to the branch. Let's face it, they're elderly. If you're under 40 and you're coming into the branch to pay your bell bill, give your head a shake, right? But, or they're from rural. So they're driving in, they turn down Mill Street, they park on either side, it's comfortable. They get out, they do their comfortable banking, they get back in, they get back out to their busy lives. That is the convenient, comfortable option that they've enjoyed till now. Unfortunately, when Mill Street closes, they're forced to either cut back 150 yards through the neighborhood on Memorial or go past to Church Street, down, cut back, then get to the 2-way street. You're almost at the TD back parking lot by the time you figure out if there is or isn't parking behind our branch. If there isn't, you're then forced to do a 10-point turn to turn around somehow, and then continue on to look for your parking in the municipal lot if there's a spot, or face the prospect of parallel parking on Arthur Street once again. That is an inconvenience. And even if you think that's a small inconvenience, multiply that by the thousands of unique visitors and vehicles that we service in a 6-month patio closure session. The sum of that is very inconvenient. It's not a small inconvenience when it's consistently for our elder. I certainly don't want my wife parking back there or my elderly mom parallel parking on Main Street. That is not the best option, and that's a frustration. Number 2, I think everyone here can agree that the solution last year was ugly. It was not something that any of us should be proud of, not the look we wanted. We had pylons on Main Street. Jenna already touched on it tonight. Concrete barriers, big blue barrels with smells and bees and flies. It wasn't maintained. There are much, much better options. I looked at the budget. Oh, before I say that, thank you to Sip and Bite. Thank you to Dave and Nida. Without their nice touches on their side of their patio, it would have been a complete disaster. So they did a great job of making their patio much more welcoming compared to the other half of the community area and the blockade. So kudos to you guys. So the next part would be, I think there's a $4,000 allotment in the BIA budget and a $1,000 regional budget. If this is the gathering community space that we want it to be, I can stretch $1, but if that's the cafeteria eating ground for all the restaurants nearby, we're going to need a lot more than stretching $4,000. It needs to be a much better destination for those restaurants if the townspeople are going to enjoy that facility. Thirdly, and lastly, the area was not used, specifically the community area, and at times the patio. The community area sat empty the majority of the time. Families were not coming into Tian Li, getting noodles, having an experience in this community sitting area. There was no window shopping. I get it, there was a pandemic. There was no window shopping being done with father, son, and mother, daughter, and let's sit and have a break at the community center. That it sat empty. That was frustrating for the inconvenient, hot customers that pulled up to the branch. Sip and Bite feedback was very, very good. Their patio feedback, the customers that came from there, they had Good food. We all know it's good food. Great service, a nice atmosphere. Congratulations, Sip and Bite. Very good feedback with that. I get it. It's a family business. It's closed Monday, Tuesday, halfway through Sunday, every night at 7. And when the weather was snowy at times, when it was too hot, when it was rainy, the patio couldn't be used. So there was an impression that the community area specifically, and sometimes the patio was not used appropriately. Let me be crystal clear here. TD is in the business of helping small business. I want to work with small businesses like Sip and Bite. I want you to come in. I want us to help you navigate the now countless government grant programs and ways to get interest-free money, get loans approved you never thought would, amortize those loans over a long time. Patio is behind Sip and Bite. As many tables as we can along them, as many parking spots as we can. I want to help you with that. The street can remain open and we can find the safest way to have the most tables possible. There are ways to do that. We are here to help. That's what I'm in business for. I want to help you do that. So I implore the council here to empower the BIA to go solutions to bring customers and business back downtown. I'm not arguing. Everyone knows that the downtown core needs a vibrant pedestrian community. But come back to the table. Let's find ways that benefit all businesses and not just a good portion of them, that don't frustrate our local townspeople when they're frustrated every time they come into the downtown core to park near my branch. Let's find ways to make downtown accessible, not less accessible. Let's find ways to beautify downtown, not put a Band-Aid solution on what's a big problem. So I do really like the idea of this pedestrian traffic, but it's a tough issue and you've got a job ahead for you, council. But either way, I want everyone in the room and watching to know that TD's there. We're here for the community for the long run. We're here to support individuals in this tough time. Want to be part of that solution. And me and my branch will be here for you long-term, whenever you need be. So thank you for a few minutes of that feedback tonight. I felt that was important for you to help make your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Deveni. Council, any questions for the delegate? Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Not a question. I just like to say to Jason, thank you for your honesty. If I would ask some of my colleagues, they would tell me that the patio was full all the time. I've heard that different times. And yet you spoke about how it was underused and many times not used at all. And of course, in the rain, you can't use it. And I'm not even sure in those real hot days in the summer, anytime I went by, it wasn't used a whole lot. And I'd go by every Sunday when I took my dog for a walk about 10 after 12, and there was nobody there, maybe one person. I'd come back an hour later, and maybe one other person at a table. That's about all I ever saw. And I made several trips into Elmira just to see how the thing was used. And I actually had some of your employees watch for me, and I'd go into the bank at 11 o'clock Saturday and say, hey, how many people were next door to the patio? And they'd tell me, nobody's been there. So that's one reason I've never liked shutting the road down, because it was an inconvenience to a lot of people, and I didn't feel that the patio was used the way it should be. I still like the idea of having the patio in the parking lot. I like to see a tent or something up. You don't have to sit in the hot sun. You can use it in the rain. You can use the patio later in the fall when the cold weather comes, because you can put the flaps down. I've probably got more experience in patios in the last 2 years than all of you put together from my travels and what I see in my deliveries. And I can tell you that all the successful ones were not on the street. They were in parking lots.
Thank you, Councilor Martin. Anyone else? Questions for Mr. Deveni? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. We will now Here, the next delegation, John Clay, Chair of the Downtown Elmira BIA. Mr. Clay, please turn on your microphone and camera, and you may begin when you're ready.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Council members, Mayor Shantz, good to be here tonight. Just want to make sure that I can share my screen. Trust me that I was not the one to wholly put this PowerPoint presentation together, but I thought we needed to have something that was available. So can you see my screen there now?
Looking good.
Perfect. I'm excited about speaking to you tonight. It's been a great opportunity to be a part of the board and be chair on the board and start to take on some of these initiatives. They are not without their challenges, and last year was a good example of that. And Jason and I have had many conversations about this as well too. He spoke the truth in many areas of what some of the challenges were last year. And I would just like to present to you tonight on what we're looking to do this year and how we can overcome some of those challenges. As Jenna mentioned too, it was a quick startup for us. We were caught a little bit off guard about how we were going to do this, how it was going to look. We were very grateful for the staff's involvement and the township help of to get the road closed down and put the barriers up. And I'd like to say it was the best we could do at the time. Looking back, sure, there was some things that we would have liked to do better in terms of the look, some of the trash receptacles, just the signage opportunities we tried to take advantage of, but I don't think it was done as well as it could be. Ideally for this space, we are looking at just creating a positive looking area for the downtown. This sets up a variety of different things, hopefully, that can happen for the downtown community. And I'll speak later about how that might work into future plans for Elmira in general. But we have the opportunity to help some of the local businesses in town and not just Sip and Bite, but Tian Li and Pyramid Pizza and Sweet Scoops, and even Never Enough Time if people want to take their food from there and come down the street and sit in this area. The large mural from the art project will be there front and center this summer that people will get a great view at. We are looking forward to it actually looking well in a very visible area in the downtown. And that's part of the reason why closing Mill Street and having that area as the community seating is very important, so that we can show off what we're looking to do to the community when they are on the main street of Arthur. Our vision now is of all the things that we didn't do well last year is to change the seating into more comfortable in a variety of areas, using Muskoka chairs and yes, picnic tables, having shade and potentially rain umbrellas, large patio umbrellas that are in every seating area, using some of the color branding that we have with our banners downtown to make the space more inviting, definitely more signage, and not just on the area, but speaking of A-frame signs, both beside the community seating area and also across the street on the west side of Arthur, so that people in those restaurants on that side know that the area is available. We're also looking at just increasing the awareness of those restaurants. So those ones that I mentioned, making sure that their customers are aware of what we have to offer, and actually encouraging them to have signage within their establishment, directing people to the community seating area out front, so that certainly if they're doing takeout, they can take their things across the street or down the block to the area that we're speaking of. So this is a rendering that Abby's part of our marketing now, did a great job, and her husband helped a little bit with this, just to to give a bit of an idea of what it can look like. We have the picnic tables like we talked about and like we had last year, but obviously with better umbrellas. And then some Muskoka chairs that just provide a different look and seating availability. The greenery, Krista at Home Hardware has already agreed to give some trees to cover the barriers. And then we're looking at having some better signage across, very similar potentially even. And I don't think the BIA in Belmont Village would mind if we pillaged some of their ideas. But that was a great looking space. And we have some items here that we're copying front and center from what they did, because they had a lot of great feedback from their area. So signage like this, better umbrellas, different seating area, more greenery, just to make the place more inviting. And especially with barriers now that are not big blockades and signs and pylons demarking the closure. So the how we exactly do the barriers is up for debate still. We're looking at building something similar to what the BIA in the Belmont Village had, having some trees out front, and then looking at some signage right on the front of the barriers that are set there. So from the main street, it is something that looks more inviting. And yes, I was planning to bring up some pictures of even last year, because it was mildly unsightly on our side. I won't disagree with Jason on that one. And we are looking to do it better this year and make it a very inviting space for the people of downtown. The BIA, our group in general, along with the township, hopefully the businesses in the downtown, we're committed to making this a better looking space and have that increase of foot traffic that we're talking about. I had the honor of sitting with Krista in the urban visioning planning session, and we're talking about these types of spaces. And I think that this is potentially a small stepping stone towards those types of endeavors to make that community area more inviting. And who knows what else? We've brainstormed about some other things in our board meetings about what are the possibilities for other things down the road. Maybe not this year with COVID, but for different options for use of this space if it's voted on positively tonight and potentially in future years to come. And that's it. I'm open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Clay. Council, any questions? I'm not seeing Fred or Sandy on my screen. Can you maybe stop sharing your screen, Mr. Clay?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, that's better. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Clay? That didn't help, but we have no questions. So thank you for your presentation. We'll move on to the third delegation. And that would be delegates are Dave and Nida Schneider from the Sip and Bite. And you may turn on your camera and your microphone and speak when you're ready. Welcome.
Am I on?
You're on.
I'm on. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about the Mill Street patio. My family and I have owned and operated the Sip and Bite for 17 years. This past year has been the most challenging of those years. We followed all COVID-19 regulations to keep our customers' community, staff, and families safe. This has meant periods where we've been closed completely, could only offer takeout service, seat only 10 customers, and seat only half our capacity. We have not been able to serve customers at full capacity as of yet. We appreciate the support Elmira has given us, and in return, we've supported our community by sponsoring the Sugar Kings, minor hockey, sledge hockey, Woolwich Community Services, and more. We've hosted 4 morning radio show charity pancake breakfast broadcasts to promote the Maple Syrup Festival, and we're very, very proud to be part of the Elmira community. I'm asking for your support in closing a portion of Mill Street again for a community patio, with a portion of it for us to use for our customers. Having outdoor dining on the patio last summer made a huge difference. It saved our business. It also allowed me to rehire staff. Without it, we would have not survived. If we don't have it this season, we won't survive. It's our hope that when the current stay-at-home order ends, the province allows outdoor dining again. We would love to be ready to put a patio on Mill Street again along the community patio to create a nice downtown experience. Outdoor dining has been encouraged more than indoor dining, and from what I hear from my customers, people still have anxiety about eating indoors and prefer to eat outside during these uncertain times. Last year, we had so many comments on how much customers enjoyed the patio and how safe they felt dining outside. When we had wait times, I encouraged people to visit our amazing downtown stores until we would text them when their table was ready. Having a patio for us and a community patio draws people downtown to get a meal from us or grab a slice of pizza from Pyramid, ice cream from Sweet Scoops, Chinese from T and Lee, food from Tandoori, a treat from Dyer Sweets, a coffee from Local Renaissance, a bite to eat from Kitchen Cuttings, and more. It supports non-food businesses too, who also get visited. The BIA has plans to improve the experience on the community side with improved seating, signage, and wayfinding through the downtown. They're adding plants and greenery too. We'll have flowers and plants on our side again and assist with watering plants on the community side. The BIA and us will have solid social media messaging to promote the patios. It should be noted that Mill Street businesses, Elmira Auto Parts and Encore Dance Studios support the Mill Street patio. It's been suggested that the parking lot behind our restaurant could be used for the patio. With the space needed for physical distancing, it would use up more parking spaces and take away one of the accesses to the civic parking lot. Deliveries to our and other businesses could not be made. Our dumpsters is behind the restaurant and it's not a pleasant sight while dining and needs to be picked up weekly. Recycling pickups for businesses and the apartments are made back there too. Our exhaust fans and air conditioners are also at the back and they create noise when they're on. Putting the patio in the front of the restaurant doesn't work because the space needed for physical distancing. There's a bench and a GRT bus stop there as well. A hybrid model that would put platforms in the on-street parking spaces on our side of Mill Street wouldn't be allowed because having cars driving right beside the patio isn't safe. None of those models include the community patio, which is important to us. As downtown businesses, we're in this together, and through the BIA, we support each other and care about each other's success. It's great to see municipalities all around us in Elmira, Fergus, Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph, support, embrace, and promote their patio districts. People love them. I love them. It's our hope that Woolwich Township will support the Mill Street patios again this summer and in summers to come. I love what I do, and I've been so blessed with such an amazing community, the best customers, and incredible, awesome, caring staff who I couldn't do what I do without them. Your support will help my business and all our downtown businesses at the time when it's needed. It also will help many businesses be able to rehire staff. Let's give our community something to look forward to. Nice patios to enjoy a glass of wine, some ice cream, a meal, a snack, whatever. Let's make a space for people to safely connect and have a conversation. Let's create a positive downtown experience that gives people a reason to come downtown. Let's be the positive and let's be the change. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me this evening. Be well and be safe.
Thank you, Mrs. Schneider. Any questions for Mrs. Schneider? Not seeing any. Thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.
Council, there's a recommendation in the report. Would anybody like to move that recommendation or, okay, Councillor Redekop, seconded by Mayor Shantz. Is there any further question or discussion? Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. I just like to speak in support of the recommendation. You know, I understand that last year wasn't pretty. And I know that NIDA was scrambling at the last minute to try to get a patio, to try to get approvals and try to make everything happen. And I thought she did a beautiful job of doing that. Allure didn't happen overnight. St. Jacobs didn't happen overnight. We've got a BIA that is visioning, that's looking forward, that's looking to do some exciting things in Elmira. So, you know, timing is everything. And I think, the pandemic is giving us opportunities, and this is an opportunity that I think we can take to provide a chance to see what it would look like with a good patio. John presented a good vision on the BIA side, and it sounds like Sip and Bite and the BIA are going to work collaboratively to make this something that we can be proud of. So I support the proposal.
Thank you. And did you second it or was your hand up just, okay, so thank you.
Also second.
Anyone else? Councilor Radikoff.
Yeah, I appreciated the articulate presentations by Mr. Clay and Ida. I think they're both work together, and I think it's important to have a positive influence in the downtown, and I really appreciated their passion.
Thank you. Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to learn that the downtown's going to be cleaned up and we don't have all those pylons in the left-hand turn lane. It looked like a construction zone. I didn't like that. The patio had some green, but it didn't look real inviting. But I must admit, it was the first year we learned from it. And I think from what I see, we're going to do it better this year. So I'll support it. The only disappointment I have is on 2 occasions I said that I would like to have some discussion about outdoor patios before we get to this, and that didn't happen. So I don't know, maybe thank you, Jenna, for that. I think there's some other options we could have looked at, but I'm prepared to live with what we have.
Thank you. Councilor McMillan.
I'd just like to take the chance to thank the members of the BIA that came out tonight and spoke on behalf of this. I would also like to acknowledge and thank Jason for coming out. I think that we do have to acknowledge his concerns, and they were real, and hopefully that we can address some of them. Some of them we're not going to. There's going to be trade-offs. You don't get a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly downtown and also have a town that's easy to drive through. So there are going to be trade-offs, and we need to acknowledge the pain that some people feel. So thank you, Jason, for coming out. But I do have to thank the BIA, the members of the BIA, the members of the business community. The work that went in, not just this year, but also last year. The BIA was meeting once a week last year at this time, trying to figure out how they were going to survive. And on this issue alone, over 2 meetings this year, we spent well north of 4 hours just brainstorming different ideas and trying to come up with a solution. So for their time tonight, for all their time on the BIA, thank you to everybody for all the effort that's gone into this, and Jenna Morris as well. None of this is possible without the work that Jenna's done. So hats off to all those people involved.
Thank you. I just wanted to make one comment or one observation, and I forgot to ask Mr. Clay the question, but I did get a response on email, which is fine. My concern is the traffic turnaround, and I think Jason alluded to it in the 9-point turn in his parking lot. And I guess I just have a concern with safety there. When people come down there and there's no place to go and they have to turn around and go back, and other vehicles are coming down that street. So I don't know, I would like somebody to keep an eye on that and make sure that there's not a danger there and we have an accident or something that happens. So anyway, we have a recommendation. I'm not going to read the recommendation. I think everybody has it in front of them. So I'm going to ask for the question. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. And Mr. I guess, Councilor Merlehan, you can come back and thank the delegates for your presentations. The next delegation this evening is Josh Freiberger, JTS Mechanical Systems, requesting for exemption for seasonal half load limit on Spitzig Road. Delegate Josh Freiberger of JTS Mechanical Systems is with us this evening. Mr. Freiberger, you may turn on your camera and your microphone when you're ready, and you can begin. Welcome.
Thank you. I hope everyone's doing well this evening, and I appreciate you taking the time to hear me out on this. And I'll keep it as short and sweet as I possibly can. So ultimately in 2019, I had applied for a building permit to put a new house up on Spitzig Road. And then obviously due to COVID, obtaining the permit was delayed. By the time the permit was delayed, then the construction costs were substantially higher. And so I chose to then delay that, hoping that it would be over by this point. However, that doesn't seem to be the case, and it's still ongoing. And I do foresee construction taking me longer than normal this year. So what I'm asking for is a variation to the half load requirement. And it's only on Spitzig Road. It's about 0.3 of a kilometer, so it's less than 1,000 feet. I'm asking for that variation in the last 2 weeks of April. And I want to bring about 20 to 25 trucks down there to get the foundation poured for the house. And I believe that's all I'll require for a variation. I won't be doing anything other than doing concrete. My current living accommodations will expire at the end of the year, so I have to make sure that I'm completed by that date. And yeah, every little bit of time I can get helps. And yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention on the onset that Mr. Poupé has a report that he's going to present later on, and I'm hoping that council will allow to delay this decision until after that report is made, or all of these decisions. Mayor Shantz?
I wonder if we could move that report up so we can deal with it all now. Is that a possibility?
Okay, I see some thumbs up. So, okay, why don't we hear from all the delegates first, and then Mr. Poupé can present his report, and then we can make the decision after that. Is that okay? All right. Any questions for Mr. Freiberger while he's still with us here? Seeing none, Mr. Freiberger will make a decision on this after we hear the other report as well. So
Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
thank you. And I guess the other ones are not presenting at all. They're just here to see the outcome of this report. Okay, I guess we'll have Mr. Poupé present his report, and then we can go from there. Mr. Poupé.
Thank you, Chair Shantz, and through you to members of council. So council deferred a decision on half load exemption requests received on the March 23rd council meeting for tonight at the April 13th Cal meeting. And the request was for staff to go away and craft a report and look into this. And really the impetus for this was an unusual number of requests being brought before council on exemptions to half load. So I appreciate we haven't had a lot of time to dive into this, but what staff were able to do is canvass our area municipalities, Wilmot, Wellesley, and Centre Wellington, to find out what has been happening this year with them. And they've indicated that there is no unusualness regarding half load exemption requests. It's all dealt with at a staff level, and if anybody wishes, they certainly can seek an exemption at council, but they haven't had those requests occurring this year. So it did make staff wonder, why is Woolwich being targeted? Because we've had about 7 of these already this year. It's an unusual number. And just from a quick Google search, included in the report was the Ready Mixing Concrete Association of Ontario had prepared a report in 2014. And lo and behold, Woolwich was included in that as a case study. And really, it's a playbook for property owners or businesses alike really how to deal with half-load exemption requests in municipalities who have such bylaws. Staff feel very strongly that this is an important bylaw that staff have. It's an old bylaw, and we've had it around for, I believe, 39 years, and it's an important one. It's so important that the Ministry of Transportation felt that they needed to include this under the Highway Traffic Act to protect a number of their road systems as well. And then any municipality has the ability by bylaw to enact those restrictions. And that seasonal load limit has typically always been from March 1st until April 30th, inclusive of that date. In our findings from discussing with area municipalities, it was Centre Wellington that has recently updated their bylaw to more mimic the Highway Traffic Act as it currently sits. It provides a number of exemptions for agricultural business, they felt that it was important to align themselves with that. It gives staff the flexibility as well as to expand that season. We appreciate with climate change, weather patterns change. And I think it's important to identify why we have seasonal load limit restrictions in place. It is to protect our road networks at their most vulnerable state, when the road base is unable to sustain loading due to its saturated conditions. So it's not always a case where it's frost coming out of the ground. It's when the road is in a saturated condition. We did do a drive through our road network the week after council asked for this report. And this has been a great year. I think it's fair to say frost has come out of the ground very slowly. I think we've had less problems in our gravel network than we have in past years. Last year was a horrendous year with the freeze thaw happening in February. It was a relatively decent year. However, we still saw a number of issues on our gravel systems, on our roads in general. They are not able to support loads in all locations, and for various reasons. I think it's incredibly important for council to understand this is a complex issue, and in no way, shape, or form are we looking to take on the Ready Mixed Association. I think it was just important to bring it to council's attention that Woolwich is named. And I think there is this will be for Alex. There is a correction that needs to occur on page 229 of my package. It stated ready mixed concrete. It's actually mixed. It's MIXED. So we'll clean that up for council next week. But during our investigation, we wanted to provide something at least for council to get a grasp on the magnitude of this. Our road networks are inadequately funded. We do not have enough annual input to sustain our entire road network system that we currently have. And the problem with allowing exemptions on half load when they're at their most vulnerable, it's not simply a case of half load creating double the damage. It's actually 16 times the damage. It's exponential. And that is then all funded by the ratepayers of Woolwich ultimately. So while the half load exemption, staff can appreciate, there are certainly cases that we could sympathize with. There are other cases that are more for profit exemption requests that have occurred this year. The simple fact is that is the entire ratepayers of Woolwich that will have to fund any exemption requests that may be granted. And so that's something that staff believe that we should not grant exemption requests. This is not a new limit period. March 1st, April 30th has always been here for the last 39 years, at least that I can tell in Woolwich. And simply put, we wanted to provide in the report a simple equation without getting into too much detail. We wanted to try to provide a standardized report or a standardized method for determining that damage. And I think that's what we've done with this equivalent single axle loading, and then looked at simply 10 tons, which is what the Highway Traffic Act allows outside of the seasonal load limit exemption or outside of the seasonal load limit period, and then what 5 tons looks like. And I think under the numbers there, that's the important takeaway, is that it is 16 times the damage, not double. That's very important. It's exponential. Again, cost, and this is damage to the system. That's what this is. So I can't state that enough. What staff are asking council to do in this report is to not provide exemptions this year, allow staff to come back before the season next year with a report and an updated bylaw that mimics the Highway Traffic Act and allows staff then to be able to flex the period. We're not suggesting it will be shorter. I want to be clear about that. We want the flexibility to potentially enact this February 15th if the weather dictates, or expand this into May. And just from a simple asset management perspective, that is the lens that we've looked at this under, and then we would look to deal with any exemption requests at staff level I would say shore up the armor that may appear to be weakened with the number of requests we've seen here. So with that, I would be more than happy to attempt to answer any questions council may have this evening on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Poupet. Council questions, Mayor Shantz.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Poupet, for the report and the presentation. We did ask you to come back with a report, but one thing I don't think I heard you address. What we asked was for the condition of the roads in now in mid-April. I know you said you went for a drive the week after. That was a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So is the frost out now? Are the roads good now?
Through you, Chairman Shantz to Mayor Shantz, staff's opinion would say no. I think if the ask of council is to have staff inspect every road section, that would be obviously a tall order. Holistically, I will say no. There's a lot of variables at play in different locations, and we saw a lot of problem areas on our drive. So it's not just the frost being out of the ground, it's ensuring that the conditions are dry. There's still a lot of wet conditions. Obviously, we've had an incredible rainy week, and that is, we're obviously dependent on the weather, roadside drainage, tree cover, is sun getting to the roadbed, all kinds of things can be at play. So you could have a stretch of road that in certain locations is reasonable, in other locations not. So that's why we just have a blanket seasonal load limit restriction period.
Okay, just one other question. Does the Highway Traffic Act that you want to kind of mimic with our bylaw, does it allow for any exemptions? Or like you're talking about extending the season on both ends potentially, or having the ability to do that. Is there any consideration given to shortening it on one end or the other if the seasons are allowed?
So there could be considerations for that. Yes, there's flexibility, and that's sorry through you, Chairman Shantz to Mayor Shantz. There certainly is flexibility for that option. Again, I think I'm concerned from a staff level for the precedent that it appears to be set, and the laser focus that appears to be on Woolwich right now with the exemption requests. When you have your municipal neighbors, they're all under the same conditions that we are, and yet they are not experiencing increased requests. It makes us wonder if there's not a concerted effort by the powers that be outside of here to focus in on Woolwich. And so if there's an opportunity for exemptions, I think there stands to be a lot of money made by certain outfits and companies. There's no question about that. And then of course, mix that in with those situations that you could sympathize with. So I think that the answer in short is yes, you could shorten the period, but I want to be clear to council, that's not staff's intent. We wouldn't look to utilize that to shorten it. Again, I think because of the underfunding of our road networks, I think we want to be very cautious about any shortening of that period. But it could certainly happen. How's that for a non-answer, I guess?
A non-answer. Councillor Martin.
Yes, thank you. First of all, let me tell you that I was totally wrong with what I suggested 3 weeks ago. I suggested that we could be in for an early spring, and I based that on what I saw on the roads that I drive every week. There was a period of time when the roads are real muddy, about a week and a half in the laneway that I go in to get in my truck. I was washing my car every day. And I thought, and then the roads dried up, the laneway dried up, and I said, you know what? We're in for an early spring, the frost is gone. I couldn't have been more wrong, because a week later, we had the heavy rains. And the roadway, of course, it's not in our township, but if you go to line 86 to Landscape Plus, turn left and go over to the 8th line, the road was so bad there that tow trucks were pulling cars out of the road that sank right down to the frame because the product was so soft. It was just last week that they opened it again by dumping some big stones in. So I couldn't have been any more wrong. The surface of the roads look dry now, but with all the rain we've had this week, ditches have a lot of water in them. So I'm sure the base has never dried out. It might be dry on top. So I don't think that we should give anybody exemption for half load. I'm going to support staff and their recommendation that they have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Redicott?
For me, the most telling point that Jared makes is that our road network is underfunded. And if we make these exemptions, it'll push us back even farther. And so I appreciate Jared's total report, but that's what sticks out to me.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do have to agree with Councilor Martin. I was for a walk on a gravel road on the weekend, and it was one that was tree covered, and the moisture was on top of the gravel, and it hadn't rained for a couple of days when I went for that walk. So obviously the frost is still coming out of the ground. Question I have for Mr. Poupet, if I may. And I don't remember seeing in the report as to what kind of damage happens when there's extra vehicles, truck traffic because of half load, where you have to double the number of trucks or even more. Does that cause more damage in the end, or less damage, or maybe you can't answer that?
To you, Chairman Shantz, it's a difficult question to answer. It is quite a complex analysis, really. But I think if I try to look at this in dollars and cents, and if we use the Ready Mixed Concrete Association's report, for example, staff would say we don't agree necessarily with their findings, but they do acknowledge 1% damage. So a replacement cost for a 1 kilometer section of an asphalt roadway in Woolwich, based on our State of the Infrastructure Regarding Roads report, is $1.3 million per kilometer. So at 1%, if my math is right, that is $13,000, and that is $13,000 per truck. So we heard the delegate talk about only 20 to 25 trucks. Well, that can add up incredibly quickly, right? So a surface treated road was around 700,000, and then I think our gravel road is about 500,000 a kilometer. So just perspective's sake, even using a report that I think staff would somewhat disagree with, but they have acknowledged that at least 1% damage per truck. So I think I can, if I could speak in dollars, that's significant. That is not an insignificant amount of damage being caused by heavy loading. Yeah,
I remember that part of the report, and I think it was 1% to 1.8%, if I remember correctly. So it could even be higher than that. Any other questions for Mr. Poupet? Councilor McMillan?
Maybe not necessarily for Jared, but I'll just throw it to you, Chair, and you could figure out where to go with it. How does this, if we pass the recommendation, and I'm in favor of the recommendation, but what does that do for the two requests that were deferred? Were they deferred for tonight that we were making a decision? I thought it was next week. What happens with that?
I believe the deferral was for this week, so we'll have to have that discussion yet after this, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Mr. Poupet.
Yeah, through you, Chair Shantz, to Councilor McMillan. Yeah, there is a special council this evening, and this is on the agenda for council's consideration tonight. So there was a decision to be made tonight, was my understanding.
Thank you. Sorry for not putting that together.
Okay, Mayor Shantz, do you have a comment? Question?
Just to note, the recommendation on the report says to enforce the load limit restrictions without exemptions. So just to be aware of that if you want to consider the two deferrals.
Okay. Councilor Merlihan?
Yeah, through you. I'll move the recommendation written as is. I think it's a good idea for coming back with a report to delegate this responsibility back to staff and align ourselves with the Traffic Act. So I'll move it written as is.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councilor Martin? Mr. Freiberger, we typically don't have delegates come back. I will give you 2 minutes to make your point.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention a couple of the things that I didn't get to get in at that point. So if I don't go down the route of the exemption, then I would have to go down the route of just requesting half load, which would then entail probably somewhere around the area of 65 trucks having to come down to still be within that legal requirement of the ministry. So I don't know exactly how much of an impact or variation that has between doing it full load or just having twice as many at half load. There is obviously a fee that I have to pay in order to achieve that, but once again, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was part of the discussion. So thank you. Any other discussion before I call for the vote? Councilor McMillan?
Yeah, just kind of the same question. What does the without exemptions mean for the two issues that are coming up in the special council meeting? Does that mean that those decisions are made? Is that what we're voting on here? I'd just like to be clear what we're voting on.
I believe that's what we're voting on, but does council want to change the motion at all, or go ahead?
Yeah, I won't change the motion. I just won't support that because I do think that if we only grant exemptions in situations where farms have been destroyed, I think that leaves a pretty tight window that not a lot of people are getting through. So I'm going to vote against the recommendation just because that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not willing to hear staff on the one exemption possibility. That I don't have my mind made up on that. I would be willing to hear staff, but I think if the one exemption that we had was for farms that had been burnt down, that's not something that we're going to be facing annually. So I'm going to vote against this recommendation as written, just because I would like to leave that door open for that one request tonight.
Mayor Shaw? Sorry.
I agree with Councillor McMillan and share his opinion that way.
Okay, and Councillor Merlihan?
Yeah, through you to Mr. Poupé. Last time we talked about this, in particular with the farmer, I'm not sure if it was Councillor McMillan that asked if staff could do a drive-by of the farm in that particular space. Did staff do that and have any kind of assessment of that stretch of the road?
Chairman Shantz, to Councillor Merlihan. I believe staff did. I was not part of that. I don't have the information there. I do know the location, New Jerusalem Road. It is a gravel road. It's in a hairpin turn. I don't believe that it is one of our greatest roadways, but if we looked at everything equal, one truck fully loaded under these conditions is 16 times the damage, meaning that it would take 16 half-loaded trucks to equal one fully loaded truck. So I think that's just an important metric that should be in consideration here, and certainly look to council for direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Are we ready?
Can I get a recorded vote there to bring you in on this, Chair Shantz?
Sure. Thanks for that.
So I'll take over and looking at the resolution or the motion as it is, that council respecting seasonal load limit restrictions direct staff to continue to enforce the current seasonal load limit restrictions without exemptions, inclusive of April 30th, and prepare an updated report and bylaw that is aligned with section 122 of the Highway Traffic Act and presented for consideration at a future meeting in 2021. If there is, if you don't like the without exceptions, if the place where they had the barn fire is going to be the issue, you could change that to allow one exception, but that's up to council. For now, if you're comfortable, I'll continue with the recorded vote for the motion as is.
Before we do that, I guess we'll have to ask the person that passed the motion and also the seconder if they want to change the motion.
I'm fine with it.
The way it is? Okay,
So I'll go through the names, not in alphabetical order, just random order. And if you say yes, you're voting in favor of the motion as written. If you say no or opposed, you're voting against it. Is everybody clear? Okay, I'm gonna start. I'll start with Councillor Redicott.
Yes.
And then Councillor Larry Shantz,
yes.
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Mayor Shantz,
No.
Councillor McMillan,
No.
and Councillor Merlihan.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Motion's passed. Thank you. So just to be clear, there are no exemptions tonight. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair Shantz.
Yes.
Do we have delegations for that special council meeting? Can we let them know that that's no longer happening? Do we still have to have a special council meeting if we can't grant the exemption?
That's just part of the special council meeting. The other ones are some other motions that are going to be looked at tonight. So that's only one of them. And I believe the other people that wanted the exemptions are on the line here. So does that answer your question, Councilor McDonald?
I just wondered if we wanted to officially thank them for showing up and let them know that it was no longer possible to get the exemption that they were hoping to get in that special council meeting. So they didn't wait until 9:30 or 9:45 to find that out.
I guess it probably will still be part of the special council meeting because we'll have a second vote on it, right? But the way it stands now, it did not pass.
Yeah, you're right. They could change our mind. Sober second thought in 34 minutes. You're right. Sorry.
Just saying.
Is our meeting going to be over in 34 minutes? That's awesome.
just Councilor McMillan's, I think. But I think they heard it loud and clear. Thank the delegations and the people that came out to hear the vote. Sorry it did not go in your favor, but there's still a minute chance that it could later on. Thank you. We have no unfinished business. Consent items, we have one item for approval and several items to be received for information. So anybody want to have any of those pulled out for discussion at all, or can we just pass them all as a group? Councilor McMillan?
I'll move that we pass them. Accept them, approve them.
Okay, Councilor Merlihan, are you seconding that? Any further discussion? And I'll call for the vote. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. We move on to staff reports and memos. This evening we have Val Hummel, Director of Corporate Services, to provide council with an overview of her report. Ms. Hummel, you may begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Councillor Shantz. I'm really just going to say it's pretty straightforward. If council has any questions, I can answer them.
That's all you have to say?
That's all I have to say.
Any questions for Ms. Hummel? And just to be clear, this is the report on workplace violence and harassment prevention. For those who might be watching from afar. Okay, do I have somebody to move the report? Mayor Shantz, seconded. Mr. Redicott, Councilor Redicott, any discussion? No, seeing none. All those in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. The next report is, again, Ms. Morris. We have an overview of her report, and you may begin when you're ready. Oh, Councillor Merland.
Yeah, sorry. I should have declared this earlier. It's another Elmira BIA thing, so I'll just step out of this. I have a pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Ms. Morris, when you're ready. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair, Councillor Shantz, and through you to the rest of council. This one's a really short and sweet one. So in an effort to broaden the scope of what can be done within the Downtown Elmira Signage Grant Program, the BIA Board has requested a few minor amendments to the program guidelines. These include increasing the grant from $1,500 to $2,000 and making replacement or repair of signage eligible projects. So just a few minor updates to the guidelines within what can be done under the CIP signage grant through the Downtown Elmira BIA. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Morris? Seeing none, Councillor Martin?
Yeah, thank you. So these signs are for local businesses?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Martin. There are 4 businesses within the BIA boundary.
Okay, so what do we do in other businesses in the township? What do we do in Higgins? What do we do in our rural area?
So this is a program that's administered through the BIA. The BIA actually, council approved the CIP guidelines. I think it was early 2019 for the BIA to be able to roll out this program. As of now, we do not have a CIP program that extends beyond the Downtown Elmira BIA. This was their initiative that they brought forward and rolled out on their own.
Okay, you're good with that, Mr. Martin? Councillor McMillan?
Yeah, just the CIP was created by the BIA with Raj, with a lot of work from Raj, and they put in $30,000 of their own money to create the CIP, and their effort was to get a provincial grant that could only be administered to businesses if there was a CIP in place, and they got that, and now through the CIP they're continuing to use BIA collected dollars to help rejuvenate and apply for other grants. Jenna's, worked really hard to get other grants. The downtown artwork project is one, and all of that is only possible if the CIP is in place. There has to be an official plan for the funds to flow through. But so far, the signage is the second program. The first one was the facade improvement last year. There were 3 different projects that were approved through the facade improvement program. And $15,000 was awarded to 3 different projects. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the CIP money could only be 30% of the total project. So for $15,000 of investment from the BIA, there was at least 3 times that put back into the rejuvenation of the downtown. To date, no money has gone into the CIP from the township. It's all from the BIA or from provincial grants. That could change. We could decide someday to say this is a good avenue for us to rejuvenate the downtown. But that's kind of how the BIA businesses get selected for it, as opposed to businesses outside the BIA. It's part of what their funds are, what their fees to the BIA are paying.
Thank you, Councillor McMillan. Any other questions or comments? Somebody that wants to move the report? Councillor McMillan? Seconder? Mayor Shantz? Further discussion? Done? I'll follow. Oh, Councillor Martin?
So this additional money, is it coming from the BIA or is it coming from the taxpayers?
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Through you, Chair, it's coming from the BIA. and the program that they applied for funding for.
Okay.
Sorry, just one more thing real quick. This isn't increasing. So the total amount of funds is already decided and isn't changing. I think, Jen, it was $10,000 for the signage program that the BIA allocated. This is just increasing the project maximum from 1,500 to 2,000. The $10,000 that's going to be allocated could now go to 5 projects instead of, quick math, whatever that is, 7 projects. So it's just increasing the per project budget, but the actual budget of $10,000 is not changing.
Okay. No other questions? Call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. And Councillor McMillan, you may come back. Thanks, Ms. Morris.
Councillor Merlin, come back.
Oh, sorry. His name wasn't there. I couldn't help it. Mr. Vink, you want to present your report on the regional official plan update?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Chairman Johnson, Council. So this is just a report. Kind of goes through and has the attachments from the region about how they're going through the regional official plan. The other portion is to focus on just providing the regional staff some comments from the township in terms of what lands we think might be strategic for them to look at in terms of providing some additional lands under the settlement boundary expansions, specifically more so in this case to the employment land. So when we went through the rationalization process a few years ago with Elmira and St. Jacobs and Breslau, we couldn't accommodate everything. So what we want to do is go to the region and say we still have some outstanding concerns. So specifically, the maps identify some areas in the east end of Elmira. We wanted some additional lands we brought in to potentially assist in growing our employment area on the east end and maybe allowing for somewhat of a bypass along the easterly side. So by bringing these lands into the settlement, that would allow for that opportunity. A small little piece of land in the bottom end of St. Jacobs that could allow for a road connection off of Henry Street and for spurring on some development on the west end of St. Jacobs. And that would be for employment purposes also. And then lastly is the Breslau area. There's 2 pieces there. This one's a little bit different. It's not just employment. So the northerly portion shown would allow for the extension of Dolman all the way through from the GO station to the downtown, which we see as a key collector. And allowing development to take place there would kind of finish that off, and the development would support that road connection. So they would actually pay for portions of that. And we would see that connection take place, which we think is critical, especially with that GO station potentially going in that location. The other location is just on the south side there. We're just looking for some additional employment lands in Breslau also. And as you recall, we have those 2 properties on that area that we gave some temporary use provisions to park trailers for the time being. We'd like to just bring them into the settlement and hopefully kind of clean some of those areas up. So what we're asking is council to support those directions to regional staff, just to help them, saying that this is something we'd like them to consider as they review their land budgeting, especially on the employment side.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Vink? Councillor Merlehan.
Not so much a question, but through you to Mr. Vink, I guess. I suppose I like, on one hand, I've always been a firm believer in holding the line on the countryside line and making density happen within the area that we have rather than expanding into farm fields. In all of these examples, they all kind of support transportation rather than being brought in to accommodate subdivisions and such like that and sprawl. So I do like that. And I like, I guess my question would be in the Elmira East End lands there. When you're coming in on Arthur Street, there's a wood lot that is fairly substantial part of that block. How does that work for if it's deemed all employment lands? Would that wood lot be protected or how would you look at that through this process?
Yes, through you, Chair Shawns, to Councilor Merlihan. So yes, although the lands will be brought into the settlement, you can't really exclude them because they're in the middle. It would be kind of like the woodlot on South Parkwood. What's natural and we need to protect would be maintained and protected and would receive a designation that would protect it as a natural feature. We would be developing the lands around it. So there would be policies about how close development could take place to the natural feature, but we would look to protect the natural feature still. It's just allowing us to connect some lands just south of that woodlot in and allow for that potential road development up from the grid up towards line 6.
Okay, and then my other question would be, by allowing these lands in Elmira, these particular ones for employment lands, our plan all along was kind of, we want employment lands because we need them, but we also need a bypass. If the region, allows this through this process, is that a thumbs up to a bypass, so to speak?
Yes, through you to Councilor Merlihan. Yes, it's not a thumbs up. It's just them saying that this makes sense as areas for employment to take place and at our direction. It would give us the opportunity and make it easier for us to see that potentially take place. But there's still a process to go through. We still need to go through an EA process to determine the exact alignment and if it's fully required, etc. So it's not a thumbs up, but it would make life easier because then again, development would help pay for that road to go in because we would do it as development comes on stream.
Okay, that's great. And at this point, the region seems to be on board with this initial plan?
Generally speaking, yes. So they seem to be in line because I'm not sure they're going to get there in the end, depending on the numbers, but they're not objecting or raising any major concerns, and they understand we are looking for some additional employment lands as we see a bit of a need taking place.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mayor Shawns?
Thank you. I know we need employment lands, and I know we want to configure a bypass. I guess just a couple of things. One is, that is the gateway into the town, and so I want to have some kind of assurance that it looks like a gateway and not just a major industrial subdivision. And my other question would be, I know that to the east there's some sensitive lands. Did you give any consideration to this big red piece being further to the east to sort of connect to the more northern piece? And I'm not sure, I can't visualize exactly where those sensitive lands are, but did you give any thought to that?
Through you, Chairman Shawns, to Mayor Shawns. So yes, in regards to the gateway section, if the region agrees and brings these lands into the settlement boundary or the countryside line, we would ultimately have to apply policies on them in our official plan. So we would then set policies about what this split could take place on these lands, and we would set the gateway policies. Similar what we probably would have done, if you recall, in Breslaw and what's proposed in the gateway proposals in Stockyards area. We'd have specific policy about what we'd want to see in those lands and what it would look like. So we would set some standards about that, and that would go into our future official plan if they're brought in. In terms of the environmental features, if you're looking at the red lands on the north side there, maybe there's that odd 45-degree almost angle there. That's kind of part of the northern part of the Kanakajig Creek is in those lands. So yes, they are in there. We realize they are in there. We realize there's implications around environmental features, whether it's the woodlot to the south or the Kanakajig. But in all of those, we have policies to say that, we would designate those lands again natural. We would determine what needs to be protected, what needs to be out of the floodplain, and where development can take place to continue to preserve and protect that. And then any development that would take place, if permitted, would go through site plans to make sure that we don't damage the environmental features or cause any impacts to them. So in the future, we don't want a problem. We want to make sure it works well for development in those areas. The challenge will be, of course, trying to cross that with the roadway.
All up.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess part of my question is regarding the amount of employment lands that we will get out of these with those sensitive features, and if we should be pushing for more. Because some of those won't be used. Like if we had to rationalize it again, we'd take some of them out.
A good point. It is, a substantial amount of land that we're bringing in. That should do us for, for a long period of time. Now, the regional official plan will give the land budget numbers. So they're going to dictate as to how much employment land the region should have in general. We flagged these because they came up through a rationalization process to say these would be candidates we want them to consider. If the region's looking to grant more lands, hey, we would potentially at that time say, look at Elmira or St. Jacobs or Breslaught for employment and what can be done and what makes sense. The red lands you're seeing, the northerly portion there pretty much is all developable. It's all farm field because the environmental features are to the south. The red lands on the southern portion does include a woodlot. However, we can't really exempt that on the drawing. It wouldn't count in the employment land calculation, just to be clear, because it's a natural feature, so it's not developable land. So that would be netted out, but would still be brought into the southern boundary. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and we're just highlighting some key areas we'd like the region to consider.
Okay. Councilor McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Shantz. Right off the bat, I apologize to Mr. Vink for not reaching out before tonight. I've got some of the same concerns that Mayor Shantz has. The aesthetic appeal of the gateway into Elmira for most people that are coming into town. I think right now we look, it's a couple of it's a gas station on the A&W, but then right past that, the new Cal Tire. You can see that there were some attempts to make it look nice. There's a fence that clearly had to be put in. I don't think they would have done that with their own money, and they planted some trees that someday will look nice there. But right now, I think there's probably about an 8 or 10 foot tall fence, and there's probably a 20-foot tall stack of tires, and it looks like a heavy industrial operation. I know it's probably classified as commercial, being a tire shop, but it really doesn't look nice. And I have trouble voting for something on paper without knowing what it's going to look like when that's what it currently looks like. And I drive by there with my wife, and we both say, like, that really shouldn't be there. That should be, on the other side of that roadway. And there should be something else here that looks nicer. And then my other concern is the countryside line. I think if we have the countryside line and we just move it when we need to, we should probably just get rid of the countryside line. And I think maybe there's some rationalization and justification that would support moving the countryside line. Maybe we've exhausted every other opportunity, but I feel like there'd have to be a more thorough process involving council to convince us that we do need to move the countryside line and it's not just a convenience. And I like the idea that by just moving the countryside line a little bit, we could get a bypass. But I'd want to see a little bit more of a plan, more of some commitment from the region that there is kind of a give and take here, and that we don't just move it, don't get the bypass, then we end up moving it again later. So I'm not against what we're seeing here necessarily, but I can't support it with the information that I have right now. And I think the things that I mentioned, we need to see like a little bit more detail on the plan on what the aesthetics of our gateway looks like into Elmira. And then, what is the cost benefit analysis of moving the countryside line? Because if we just move it when we feel like we should, it's not doing its job. So I feel like it needs a little more support than that.
So through you, Mayor, Chairman Shantz, to Councillor McMillan. So back to the gateway comment. understood, but when tonight we're not buying into any policies or aesthetics or design. We're just saying to the region, if there's flexibility in the land budget for employment lands, we want some flexibility and potentially in Elmira. So eventually, if they brought them in, the region would just move the boundary line at some point for us. The township would have to implement and come forward with staff reports and recommendations and details about what those aesthetics would entail, okay? And then council would have to build those aesthetics and buy into them and pass them. So the region's not going to do it, no one's going to do it yet. It's just to put the issue on the table in front of the region to say, we'd like some consideration for employment lands in Elmira. We're out of employment lands right now, pretty much. For the longer term, to take us to 2051, we want some flexibility. The land budget will tell exactly what the region should be providing holistically in terms of employment lands. So that's what the region has got to work to as per the province's calculations. So the region is going to divvy up what they can amongst, and what they think is appropriate of where these lands should be included as employment lands. So we're just saying that these are areas, if they have employment lands and there's numbers that work, that they are handing out employment lands to locations, we'd like them to consider Elmira because we don't have much land, and B, this would address some issues and it's a good location, Elmira. So the cost benefit doesn't exist because we're not getting to that point. It's just to get the region to know that these are locations we'd like them to consider. The land budget from the region will actually bring us there of whether the land should be brought in or not from a regional perspective. Ultimately, when subdivisions develop, residential or industrial, we would look to say, like, what is the benefits? This is a longer term plan. Realize this is not going to just shift now and then shift 10 years from now and 15 years. That's not the plan. This is a plan, hopefully, that'll take the Elmira and the rest of the region to 2051 on the land budget. For sure, the 2051 and a bit beyond. So this is not it's going to change randomly. It's taking us the longer term. So it's to calculate how we're going to grow longer term, simply too. So that's the plan here.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Brenneman, I see you coming on board. Go ahead.
I just want to emphasize, the point that Jeremy is making and underscore it, that strategically the decision council would be making here in terms of submitting appropriate comments to the region is about the fact that we are almost out of employment land. We definitely need more employment land for Elmira. We need more employment land as a whole for Woolwich, because ultimately what we want to continue to try and achieve is more of a balanced assessment. We certainly don't want to be just about residential. We have to be planning for our future in terms of employment land opportunities. And I would say that that's the thing I need to underscore in terms of what Jeremy has outlined. Strategically, we want to make sure the region knows we're interested. We want to have that discussion with them. Generally speaking, here's what we're looking at. But I agree with him that a lot of the other good points that have been raised around gateway and placement of where you put prestige industrial versus heavy industrial, more unsightly type, those are things that ultimately can be worked out in the fullness of time. But what's important is that the region hears that we as a community want more employment land development so we can have more of a balanced assessment base ultimately for our future services and programs.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I do have a quick question for Mr. Vink, and that's over in the Breslau area. I guess I would call it the parcel that's, I guess, northeast, that corner. The Dolman Street extension, I guess I'll call that area. We're going to have to do either an overpass or an underpass with the railroad. And does DC cover that? And how does that work?
So for you to yourself, we will find that out in the near future of what is proposed and what's coming. That's the environmental assessment is underway and they're wrapping that up this year. So sometime this year, the consultant and Ryan Tucker will be coming back with what Dolman extension will look like through these pieces of land and how it's going to connect into that Thomasfield subdivision in and around the GO station. So that'll be presented to council later this year as to what the recommendation will be, what that will look like.
Yeah, and I guess my other comment is the other area that's hatched out there. I think that's probably a no-brainer to have that brought in because it's being used like that now. So it would be a good fit for sure. So, any other comments for Mr. Vink, or does somebody want to pass the recommendation? Councillor Merlehan and Councillor Martin. Any other discussion? All those in favor? And opposed? Okay, noted. And that's passed. Thank you. And I guess you're on the next one too, Mr. Vink.
Yes, thank you once again, Mr. Chair. So I'll keep this short. The Thomasfield subdivision, which we were just talking about in Breslau, the Hopewell Crossing, they're going to split up their second phase a little bit. To do that, to split up their phasing, we have to amend the subdivision agreement. So that rather than try and amend every single clause, which it came out to be almost, we determined that it's easier just to rewrite the subdivision agreement and pass them all and change everything up, as well as the lot and block agreements to accommodate them splitting up the staging. So the report is just to have council agree to the amending clauses to allow them to split up stage 2.
Okay. Short and sweet. Any questions for Mr. Vink? Someone want to pass that recommendation? Councillor McMillan and Councillor Reddecock. Any further? Being none, I'll call for the question. All in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. And you're on a roll, Mr. Vink. I think you're the next one.
Thank you. So another subdivision, this is the Southwood Forest subdivision in Elmira on the south end. They are trying to just modify their one phase to allow some additional units to take place in this upcoming phase and then take them away from their next phase thereafter. So it's just moving 25 units, but to do that, they have to amend the subdivision agreement. But rather than rewrite the whole agreement, we're just doing an addendum, so it's a little bit shorter, so it's not a few hundred pages for you to read. So, the applicant would have attended tonight, but they are completely in support of it, so they didn't think they needed to attend. So neither Dennis nor their consultant is here this evening, but they're completely in support.
Okay. Questions, comments, council? Seeing none, anybody want to pass the recommendation or pass the motion, I should say, sorry. Councillor Martin, second. Councillor McMillan. Any questions, comments? And we'll ask the question, all in favor? And that is passed. Okay, I guess Mr. Poupet, you're back on board with the Martin Grove infrastructure. Welcome back.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Sean. So through you to council. One second, I apologize here. So we got a few reports in order here. We're going to rip through these here. Before council this evening, we've got the replacement of the dilapidated Martin Grove Road structure. It is a dead-ended road. And I think I wanted to highlight this to council. What we found out is that these dead-ended road structures, the replacement, they cost more. And in this case, we're to the tune of about 165,000, roughly, more than what you would have to replace the same structure on a through road. We just thought that was important information for council. Dead-ended roads cost more because there is no other form of access. You have to build a temporary access to facilitate the homes on the other side. You also have utilities. Typically, hydro can be serviced from both ends of a roadway. Where you have dead-ended structures, a lot of times that's not possible. So there's an additional cost for dealing with the hydro servicing as well. So that is just a factual statement that we found through this tender. We were quite happy with the interest in receiving, I believe it was 8 bids received. So we found that the construction projects, it's almost like there is no pandemic occurring, just the way that bidders are applying. With that, the only pieces I really want to bring to council's attention is that we are looking to purchase the 4 meters on either side of the bridge structure. That should set up future generations who will ever have to deal with this and allow future maintenance activities to occur, all within the road allowance. So with that, I'm not going to add anything further other than just request council to award tender 2021-03 for the replacement of the Martin Grove bridge structure to Robert M. Simon Construction Limited at a total cost of $829,559.28 after HST rebate. Further, to have council retain GM Blue Plan Engineering for the contract administration inspection services at a cost of $59,122.56, and also authorize staff to purchase the land and the mayor and clerk to sign all necessary documents related to the tender and the land purchases. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well done. Councilor Martin.
Thank you. A quick question, Jared. And I'll ask the same question for the next report. Who are these guys? Robert M. Simon. Never heard of them. Where are they from? And what do we know about them?
Sure. Yeah. Through Chairman Shantz to Councillor Martin. Woolwich has had no experience with Robert M. Simon. We certainly feel that they're more than competent and capable to carry out this work. It's my understanding they've worked in Norfolk County and Brant County. So they've moved this way. They are a fairly decent sized outfit. And all the references we checked had certainly satisfactory reviews. So we're not envisioning any challenges. It's just a new face to Woolwich. So, here's to a new relationship.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Coupe? Someone want to move the recommendation? Councilor Martin? Councilor Redicott? I'll ask the question. All in favor? And that is passed. Mr. Coupe, number 2. Glasgow Street.
Shots through you to members of council. So we have another tender award. This is for the Glasgow Street South Bridge. I'll remind council that we were successful in securing upper government funding for this to the tune of about 80% of the dollars that you see here in the report. That is significant, and well done by staff to secure that, because this would be a very difficult project to fund, as we all know, and as council is certainly aware. With that, I think the important piece to highlight here is that we are purchasing property as well for the turnaround. This flowed from the EA process and was brought up to us from the members of the public, contingency who recommended that we look at a one-way bridge structure to prolong its useful life. I mean, I think it's very important here that most commuters don't truly appreciate the historic nature or the fragility of these old, I think the steel here is 1887, incredibly old structures. And they just are looking to get from one place to another. So by having contraflow cycling lanes and obviously the ability to walk across it in both directions, we're really just having residents from Conestoga being able to leave Conestoga and head into Waterloo, but then on their return trip would have to go through Northfield Drive or an alternate route home. But again, that's not going to limit probably half the amount of traffic, but is we just felt it was the best we could do with what we have, and try to keep the structure in place as long as possible. With that, then staff are asking that council award the tender for the rehabilitation of the Glasgow Street South Bridge to Lancoa Contract Incorporated at a total cost of $1,065,289.42 after HST rebate. Authorize the mayor and clerk obviously to sign the contract documents and any land purchase agreements, as well as retaining GM Blue Plan Engineering for the construction, administration and inspection and post-construction services at a cost of $85,534.37. And if I could be so bold as to answer Councillor Martin's question, we again are not familiar with Lancoa. However, GM Blue Plan has worked successfully with Lancoa in other jurisdictions. So again, we don't foresee any issues here and are looking for hopefully a successful project.
Does that include the hammerhead on Glasgow for the turnaround on the other side, or no?
No, to you, Chairman Shantz. No, it's not. That is looking to be included as part of the paving tender. It was very different work, and we just felt we would get better value to have it included under a more appropriate annual contract.
Yeah, I thought I had read that somewhere else, but I wasn't sure. So, any other questions for Mr. Poupé? Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, thank you. Not for this project specifically, but for both of them, is there any reason why we're getting two new bidders from outside the area that we're not familiar with? Is this COVID related? More people getting into construction business? What's happening here?
To Chairman Shantz, to Councillor McMillan, it's a difficult one to say. Glasgow's very different from Martin Grove, more specialized in what is happening. Martin Grove, the awards or the bidders we saw, we're very familiar with a number of them. So it's difficult to say, why certain contractors are moving right now. But at the end of the day, we are low bid, and that's what we're seeking endorsement for.
Anybody want to move it? Councillor Merlehan, is that you want to move it? Okay. Seconder? Councillor Martin. Any further discussion? All those in favor? And that is passed. Well, Mr. Poupé, Water Street I&I.
Thank you, Chairman Shantz, through you to members of council. This is an interesting report before council here. There's a number of pieces to this one. Water in Yonge Street and St. Jacobs, that is certainly, St. Jacobs is one of our highest I&I contributors. And this has languished with staff for some time. It has been on a number of capital programs, and we have struggled to move this one forward. So it was decided, and council endorsed that through the 2021 capital budget, to seek external services more specialized for this type of work. The concern with I&I in a sanitary system would be what happens if you plug the system, where would that water go? So there's certain concerns that we need explored, and that's why we've relied on the services. And in this case, we're asking council to approve GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited at a total cost of $99,165.12 after HST rebate to do exploratory work, basically do a design, and then us look to implement that design. And the roadway is deteriorating. So the real piece for staff to grapple with is, what do we do with the underground infrastructure? Of course, it wouldn't make fiscal sense to simply put a bunch of new asphalt on and not deal with the underground. And in this case, it's not quite as simple as in other situations. So we need to get a handle on the I&I. And St. Jacobs, of course, has the Series 160 water main, which is a thin-walled PVC pipe as well. So all those things are going to be explored. And then, of course, we would come back with a recommendation to council for how we proceed. As part of that, we felt that we have not really hit the market with regards to our annual monitoring program, which is in Breslau, St. Jacobs, Elmira, and in Heidelberg at times as well. This is contained in our operating budget. We have typically used Norton Engineering, and we felt that it was appropriate to test the waters, and that's what we did. And we were thankful, and we are asking council to award that work on a one-year contract basis to the tune of $28,808.67 after HST rebate to GM Blue Plan Engineering. There is some transitionary monies being expended with Norton as well. We have a long-standing relation and a very good relationship with Norton Engineering. So there needs to be a transitionary period, and we're seeking council to endorse or give staff the ability that if GM is successful and we're all happy, that we look to extend that annual monitoring program for 2 additional years after this first year. As also part of this, council is well aware that we have an annual cured in place pipelining program that we've implemented since 2016 and been very successful. We took a year off last year in 2020 due to COVID. It was obvious to us through this process that GM Blue Plan has the specialties that staff do not have in regards to CIPP lining. This is an industry that is fast changing and ever evolving with regards to proprietary information and how people make their liners to how they cure their liners. So this is this is something we felt it would be very valuable to the township to try to get more in the leading edge of an annual program regarding pipelining. There's great value into lining systems to match other assets above them. And so we see great value in that. And we think that there's great value in also having council approve GM Blue Plan to the tune of $7,400 to have a look at our tender process and then walk through a program with Woolwich. So we do have monies in the budget this year approved by council in 2021. And if COVID restrictions lighten up, or if there's opportunity to explore lining of pipe networks that do not require access to residents or businesses, staff may be implementing that. And with all of that, we are asking obviously the mayor and clerk to sign all the necessary consultant agreements to implement this work. And with that long-winded introduction, I would be happy to try to answer any questions council may have on this.
Council questions for Mr. Coupé? I have a question since I don't see anyone else. The 99,000, basically $100,000, does that give us any engineering of that system, or does it just give us what the damage is and then we still have to engineer after that?
No, to you, Chairman Shantz. No, that is engineered, tender drawings, the whole bit going through construction, like getting us to construction from an engineering perspective. So all the investigative work, preparing the plans, the necessary plans to go to construction.
Thank you. Any other questions? Someone want to move the recommendation? Councilor McMillan and the Mayor Shantz. Any last chance for questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. And well, we can skip one and move on to the next one. Drainage Superintendent, Mr. Coupé.
Thank you, Chairman Shantz. Through you to members of council. I do have a modification that I'm going to request gets made. I believe it'd be by Alex, that we switch the recommendation and to move point 2 up to point 1. So we're seeking council to exempt the appointment of the drainage superintendent first from the requirements of the purchasing bylaw, and then appoint by bylaw the firm of K-Smart. I think that's just more an administrative piece. With that, this is a service that has transitioned from corporate services to infrastructure services through the reorganization. And it has been a bit slow. I think that corporate service is quite happy with this transition. And as part of that transition, infrastructure services is looking to appoint a new drainage superintendent, as the report spells out. We are seeking to appoint K-Smart Engineering. And we will be looking to potentially move the drainage superintendent position to a staff position at some point, but of course there would be reporting and discussion required. So that I think we did contain that in the report, and just to it's more an FYI for council. But at this point, it is a contracted service, and we do receive, I believe it's 50% funding from the province regarding the services that they provide us. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? Oh, finally, Mr. Merlehan, Councilor Merlehan.
Finally, the heck?
Everybody was sleeping, nobody was asking questions. I could hardly get anybody to move these things, so.
Well,
go ahead.
We got to make Councilor McMillan's 34-minute timeline. Through you, Chair, I'm going to probably direct this to Mr. Brenneman. And I'm going to take us back to the report for the drainage here. I'm fine with. It's the last part of the report where it talks about adding more staff. And it's starting as a little priming us for what's coming. Can we go back to the consultant report that did the reorg and refresh my memory? Because yes, while council agreed to do a shift of duties from corporate services to the development services, the drainage, just because it kind of made a little bit more sense. There wasn't any talk about adding staff to do that. This year, I guess the last 2 years, it's been a little bit more intensified with drainage, but we're dealing with drains that have traditionally not been touched in 30 or more years. And I'm questioning right now, before the report is already written and justifications are made, why we would look at bringing in a full-time staff to deal with, you clean them up, you fix them up, and then we've been working with contracted services that specialize in this, and this just seems like more bloat at this point. And I kind of want to know if I'm off base, if I forgot that back whenever we did this reorg 2018 that we also agreed to full-time staff in this area. Can you do that first, I guess?
Sure. I can confirm that the only thing that the reorg did speak to was the fact that there should be an appropriate realignment between corporate services and infrastructure services. That was the appropriate department for which drainage engineering ultimately should be provided oversight and administration. I do know, though, as well, that one of the things that staff is always trying to do is to evaluate what is the best way and the most efficient way going forward, to provide oversight for drainage services. I would ask that perhaps Jared speak to the fact that I believe there has been, albeit perhaps limited, discussion with at least one other township, maybe more, with respect to seeing whether there's an opportunity for some sort of collaboration that would make sense. I know that's something that has been explored. The other thing I would have to have either Val or Richard speak to, because it's been a while since I've researched how things are funded through the province, and whether, if we still had the staffing position, whether ultimately we would still be eligible to receive appropriate funding from the province, no different than where we contract these services. But again, the short answer to your question is no, there was only a realignment envisioned. But as I said, I am aware that there have been some discussions, I believe, with Wilmot about what drainage engineering services might look like for the respective municipalities going forward.
Okay, thank you.
To follow up, I guess, to David's point as well, is that yes, an internal staff person would be eligible, so they would still be subsidized from the province. And it was Wilmot that we have had discussions with, and those started to cease because of COVID when that rolled out. But we had begun to talk. It is I would hazard to say it's a bit of a neglected area, and obviously something that the department needs to deal with and be involved in. And even though we are hiring a drainage superintendent, I want council to be fully aware that that does not negate staff's responsibility and oversight. That is time and effort on staff's end, even under this scenario. So I think what I would suggest is that It's not like we have a report written or there's one coming tomorrow. I don't even know if there'll be one this year. I think what was important is that we are asking council to appoint by bylaw a drainage superintendent, and just to make it known that it would be the department's intent to bring something forward at some point in the future.
Thank you. Any other, Mr. Patrick came on board. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So David asked the question about funding for this, and whether, if we had a staff person, whether the 50% funding for the province would still be applicable. The answer is yes. So as long as they are doing drainage superintendent work, we can make a claim for 50% of that time and receive a rebate for it. So just to answer that question.
Thank you. And Councillor Merlehan, you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, through you to Mr. Petherick. So would the province, would they continue to pay the 50%, the liabilities that, you know, a staff person brings to a business, the municipality in particular, for retirement benefits and all the wages and stuff till they're 65? Is that something that would continue on with a full-time staff member?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as long as the person is an active employee having costs, they would cover that 50%. If you're talking about if this person would be with us for a specific time period, then retire before they're 65 and then still be on benefits, I would say no, that wouldn't be an applicable cost. They would have to be doing specific superintendent work, and that's what would be covered.
Okay, so when job descriptions are made and the cost benefit that the township does, do they factor in those additional years of continued payment for all staff when it comes, when you look at we can contract the service out to an engineering firm versus bringing somebody in house? You know, if we paid 60,000 a year and the engineering was paying 100,000 a year, well, you know, that sounds good, but if you got an extra 20 years of paying all the extras after that staff person leaves, then, you know, that might not iron out too well. But are those considered in these cost benefit?
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman. So what we do, we look at it from the perspective of saying, yeah, here's what the salary would be. Here's all the benefits that would apply to that position on an annual basis. And that's what we look at from a comparison from a year to year, because you can't really predict what's going to happen in the future. So, you know, we can't say that this person is going to be with us, you know, for 30 years and, you know, they may be on an extended, you know, I guess having their benefits covered, you know, before they're 65 type of thing. We can't predict that. So we don't try to bring that in our calculation, but we do for sure do is to say, this is what the position costs from a salary perspective, and what does all of the benefits we pay, what does all of that cost, and put that into a total number.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we could, you know, we can't predict it to a dollar and cent, but, you know, based on past performance and, you know, the money that we are spending on past employees for, you know, no long, I mean, you could do a baseline and have a general idea of what those costs are when you put those things in. I mean, this can be a discussion for another time. I'm bringing it up because I'm just, you know, I see this is the playbook being launched, and you know, and it starts with a couple of little lines in a report, and then, you know, a year or two from now we're dealing with there'll be other reports that have that too. So, you know, I'm well aware what's happening, and those justifications, I think they just need to be more upfront, and I understand you want to be transparent, and you're putting it out here as a, you know, maybe we're looking at this, but I'm seeing the pattern, and I'm just identifying that. That's all.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Randall.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback, Councillor Merlehan. I mean, I think what's fair to say though is that you know, you're just asking for council to have all the information to make an informed decision, because you know, I think there have been circumstances, or at least one that I can think of, where, originally staff was thinking that in our building services area, that it would be more cost effective to bring into an outside consultant on a limited basis to provide staff support. But when we actually did the analysis for council, it was determined that it was far more efficient and cost effective to have in-house staff in those circumstances. So, I think it's fair to say that you're looking for, and I'm sure all the council is looking for, an appropriate comparison and appropriate analysis, because we have had circumstances by which in-house has been far more cost effective than contracting out, and then vice versa as well. Point made, absolutely. We'll make sure that we provide the appropriate information in any future analysis that might be brought forward.
Okay, we have a recommendation, not including a staff hire. So just wondering if somebody wants to pass that recommendation or move that recommendation, I'm sorry. Oh, Councilor McMillan and Councilor Redikoff. Any more discussion? All those in favor? And that is passed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Poupé. And now we go on to Mr. Petherick, verbal update correspondence from the Ministry of Infrastructure regarding asset management planning and municipal infrastructure regulations. So
there
you are.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So under old regulation 588-17, every municipality is required to basically update their asset management plan for the core infrastructure, and that was supposed to be done by July 1st, 2021. And then a couple of years later, you'd have to incorporate all of your assets and then do building upon this in phase 3 the year after that. So with COVID, not surprisingly, it really, I guess, kind of messed a lot of plans up for not just businesses, but also in the municipal world. Staff have been very busy, not just here at Woolwich, but in other municipalities, dealing with the pandemic and shifting priorities. So thankfully, it is something that a number of associations, including MFOA, which we are a member of, I believe AMO has also done the same, where they made advocacy to the province to say, let's extend these timelines, because a lot of work has to go into our asset management plans and to bring them up to date. And so for us, we're just very welcoming to see that the province extended those due dates by a year. I can tell you that if they did not, I would bet that we would not have either an updated asset management plan to council this year on July 1st. And if we did, I would say it wouldn't have been as good as what it should be. So we're very thankful that the province actually did extend the timelines by a year. And that is going to definitely help not just us in Woolwich, but other municipalities make sure that we're paying the particular attention that we should to our asset management plans. So I just wanted to bring that up to council's attention in case you were just waiting with bated breath to see the updated asset management plan this year. You are not. It's going to be in 2022.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Councilor Merlehan.
Well, I'm quite disappointed not to see that asset management plan, but I'm through you, Chair Shantz, to Mr. Petherick. Can you tell us exactly where we are in Woolwich? Because when and I don't know if it's the same, but Mr. Poupé's department development has been, moving along quite smoothly with no real impacts from COVID to get work done in that department. I'm just wondering where are we behind because of COVID in the asset management plan?
Yeah, so through Mr. Chairman, I'm going to probably do this as much justice as I can. I wish I had Mr. Schmidt on, because he would tell you very precisely exactly where we are. Really, I think everything started to bottleneck last year. That's kind of really, when we're at the beginning part of the pandemic, that's when a lot of our focus changed. And that's what really sort of put us behind, because we should have been working on our plans probably about this time last year is when we should have been, formulating our working groups, getting the information that we need to be able to put into the updated asset management plan. What we still were able to achieve in 2020 was we did some condition assessments. We got some of them done for our facilities. We still continue to go through the data from both our roads and our bridge infrastructure. So we are doing our condition assessments. We are getting that up to date. Jeff is going off and still continue to do some data cleansing, getting some of our inventories up to date. So we are still doing some work, but the problem is that it really was at the beginning part of the pandemic, and that's where I think we found the bottleneck, and that's where I think a lot of municipalities found it. And right now, we're trying to do some catch up because it's a team effort. It's not just infrastructure that has to put the work into it. It's got to be a team infrastructure or a teamwork, not just infrastructure, but finance, even facilities need to be involved in it at the beginning part, because the policies we're going to come up with of how we're going to formulate even the asset management plan for our core infrastructure really is going to flow into every other piece of infrastructure we have, including our facilities and our recreation. So we need every department at the table, being a part of this right from the beginning. And so having that extra time is going to be able to do that for us.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I guess you don't want to be outdone by Mr. Vink or Mr. Coupe, so you have some more comments to make. But according to my notes, it looks like the same thing, but it must be different.
Yes, through Mr. Chairman. So we just wanted to give council and circle back with council with some discussions we had with Woolwich Community Services and Community Care Concepts on the COVID Relief Fund. So this is the money that council put into the 2021 budget. So I'll kind of start off a little bit, but I think once we finish that conversation, I'd like to sort of broach council with their thoughts on us potentially going down another tax deferral program in 2021. So first to hit on the topic of the COVID Relief Fund, as I said, Dave and I had an opportunity to talk to both Woolwich Community Services and Community Care Concepts. I'll let David kind of speak to his comments and his thoughts on it. My takeaway was it's not as easy as we were thinking. It wasn't as easy as just here's we have a pot of money. Here's some money. What could you do with it? What could we partner with it? I think the message we heard is, while we'd always accept money because there's always a need, it's not as simple as just giving the money and letting them go. But we did have a very productive session that we were able to brainstorm a couple of ideas, and from our side, we talked about how could we best help more so the residents of Woolwich, both from those that are in need, from those that may be in a low income situation to those that are elderly and need help in other circumstances. David, I'm not sure if you want to jump in and kind of add a few things to it.
Just one, you've done a very good summary, Richard, but one additional avenue that, that I want to make council aware of, and this just shows, I think, really the humbleness or the humility of our community support agencies. If we look at this, as Richard noted, and as both Kelly Christie and Kathy Harrington looked at things, it was clear, how do we best support the residents in need or the most vulnerable? Because that really is the focus. And one of the areas, respectfully, that we may want to look at things, even though they didn't make this ask, Richard and I questioned them on it, is, okay, if it's not just as easy to say, okay, let's collaborate, let's, say even transfer money to a fund, but then there's all that additional work and resources that we're even putting on those community support agencies, and they have limited staffing. Would it actually be, if we're trying to make the greatest impact on the resident and the most vulnerable, provide actually additional support in these times for the not-for-profit community support agencies like Woolwich Community Services, like Community Care Concepts, like Woolwich Counseling Services, who are providing, mental health awareness and supports, things of that nature. So it was a very good meeting because, as Richard said, the two ladies explained to us very eloquently, oh, it's not as easy as just collaborating. But that's the one thing I just wanted to put out to council that we had not considered previously, is the notion that maybe there is a portion or some extra funding that could be provided because ultimately they assured us the money is then going to go right into the frontline supports that they're already providing, to our residents. And we know they do a very good job doing that, whether that be for individual residents that need support for rents or things of that nature, or some of our seniors. So that's the only thing I wanted to add, Richard.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilor McMillan?
Yeah, I don't hate that idea. Is there a next step to that? Would there be like, let staff take it away and talk to the different services and say, we've got this pool of money. Do you have any pressing needs? What this could be used for? I guess if we did go down that path, what would the next steps be?
Well, I through you, Mr. Chair, I think though Richard still wants to talk to you about the fact that there is a movement in other area municipalities regarding tax deferral. And obviously that has some level of impact on the overall discussion. But certainly if council had, general consensus or support, for exploring what additional support might look like, that certainly is one of the next steps that we could take. But I think Richard needs to also speak to tax deferral and ultimately what another program like that may cost and mean to us as well when we factor this all in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, David. So through you, Mr. Chairman, I would say last year when we were going through the first tax deferral program in 2020, we were pretty unified as a region. We all kind of pretty much walked in step. I think just two of the townships, they just didn't see the need. We had multiple discussions at area treasurers, I would say, over the last couple of months, and for the most part, we've been looking at, our trend lines, how people have been paying the first installment. What are the things that are happening? Have we been hearing from the community? Have we been hearing from our businesses? And I would say up until probably fairly recently, we started hearing very strongly from some of our businesses asking if we were going to be doing another deferral program. We know that a couple of the cities in the region are going to be doing that. They're bringing a report to the council, I believe, next week. I don't believe all of the cities will be doing that, nor are all the townships doing that. I think they haven't seen the need. They haven't seen the push from their businesses or their residents asking for a program of any kind that or anything similar like we had last year. But we're starting to hear from our businesses asking the question, what can you do for us? Is there a tax deferral program coming? So from a staff perspective, we're thinking that we want to bring something to council as early as next week, making some sort of recommendation on what a program would look like. From our standpoint, it would be very, very similar to what we did in 2020. Make it, still fairly easy for people to get onto the tax deferral program. It would still be a 60-day deferral. This time we would be adding the second installment of the interim. So there would be like basically three installments, the last one for the interim as well as two for the final. They would be the ones that would be extended by 60 days each. That's kind of what we're looking at. And that is the same thing that the other couple of the other cities within the region, they're looking at doing the exact same thing. So we just kind of want to be in at least in lockstep with what they're doing if we're going to be thinking about doing a program. I know it's always hard to tell what's going to happen. I mean, I know right now we're in the stay-at-home orders. Was a shutdown, now it's a stay-at-home. It's supposed to be over by, I think, May 6th. I think that was the first timeline. Whether that's going to happen based on some of the numbers we still keep seeing. Is it going to be extended? We don't know. Is it going to go back to regional? We don't know. But I think we're starting to see that our businesses and to a certain point, our residents are still getting affected by COVID. And so having a program at least helps those that actually need some sort of cash flow, and some help from that perspective. I would say one of the other things probably just to add, if I were to base what I saw or what we saw last year, I think we had about 28 properties that got into the tax deferral. So it wasn't a huge uptake. So if we had something very similar, I would probably guess maybe $1,000 is probably what we lose in interest income. It's probably what it would be based on what we saw last year. But we don't know if that's going to be the same thing that's going to happen in 2021. So it could be much higher, or it could be much lower, or it could be pretty much the same. It's something we'll all have to tell when we go through the program. But I think I wanted to approach council to say, you know what, if at the very least you saw the mayor and staff putting in some work to get a report done to bring to council as early as next week, then we can certainly do that. Totally prepared to do that, and then we can have a further discussion if council so chooses at next week's meeting.
Okay. Council, thumbs up? Yeah? We're good? Okay, sounds like that's the direction we want to go, Mr. Patrick. So thank you. Councilor Merlihan.
Yeah, through you, Councilor Shantz. I'm okay with the tax deferral and having a report next week. That sounds good. The other thing, the other idea that Mr. Brenneman brought forward with giving the money directly to the support services, that idea seems appropriate. I would ask to include the Woolwich Senior Center at the WMC. Their revenues went to zero last year, and they have been getting some funds, but they deliver direct support and have been delivering programs to the seniors, which and have been a great outreach for them. So I would like that they get a fair portion of whatever's decided on being divvied out amongst those groups.
Yes, Mr. Brenneman.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm glad Councillor Merlihan brought that up, because the additional feedback that Richard and I could have reported back on was, again, a sign of their humility, was the fact that they would think that we as a township should also consider whether we would open it to some of the service clubs, or even some of the groups like Boy Scouts and Girl Guides and things like that. How far we would open up, I mean, ultimately council can decide, but the notion was that the pandemic has hit a lot of our frontline service groups, regardless of whether they're, our traditional community support agencies or even our service organizations, because they all do amazing things to support community and our residents and our children and our youth and things of that nature. So, I have to say, it was a good exploratory discussion that brought out some good ideas about how we can best make an impact for our community. And I think we're on the right, path.
Perfect. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Patrick. Outstanding activity list. Anybody want to deal with anything there at all? Add anything to it? Seeing nothing. Correspondence. We have a number of correspondence. Anybody want to take any action on any of those? Councilor Merlihan?
The city of Kitchener had a good motion that they forward just about the Planning Act and timelines and such that I thought would probably be appropriate for Woolwich to support. I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. I was looking at that one as well. So is council okay with that, or want to talk about that? Councilor McMillan?
I would likely support it. I think City of Kitchener usually does pretty good things, and if Councilor Merlehan read it, I probably trust his judgment as well. But is Mr. Pomponi on the call? Like, would he be able to have any comments about? I'm just trying to delay so I can read the letter quickly.
You just want to add to the 34 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead, Mr. Pomponi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I've read the correspondence, and it's certainly something that's supportable. I'd say there's two elements that were not included that council may want to consider if they wanted to add to it. One of the consequences is the shortened timeframes is that in the past it's been used as a tactic by some developers of waiting the deadlines, knowing that municipalities can't meet the deadline, and then appealing to the board or LPAT, which has two consequences. One, it drives up the costs for the municipality to defend those at the board. That's one issue, which I don't think was identified in the letter from Kitchener. And the other one, which I think is also very important, that wasn't specifically identified, was by these applications being appealed to the board, it removes the opportunity for local decision-making by council. Council is then put in a position to defend it. They go through mediation, but if there's a dispute, the decisions are not made by council, they're made by a chair at LPAT. And those are two additional points I think are kind of something that you may want to consider adding in if you wanted to, or at least acknowledge that there are concerns of local municipalities. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Dr. McMillan, are you okay with that answer?
Yeah, I mean, Councilor Merlehan asked for, would we be okay writing a letter of support of the City of Kitchener's motion, CCing all the municipalities in AMO and adding Mr. Pomponi's additions?
Good. Nods of heads, thumbs up or anything? Yep.
Can I get a motion of endorsement?
Ms. Hummel is asking for a motion of endorsement. So, Councilor Merlehan?
I'll second Councillor McMillan's motion that he just did previously. So
I'll second Councilor Merlehan's motion.
We can just save words.
Seconders and no
mover.
It's like a revolving door. Mayor Sean, you had some comments first before we move on.
Just maybe for Val, if we're just endorsing it, how do we add the other two pieces?
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the question?
You faded out, Mayor Sean. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I turned into a pumpkin at 10 o'clock, sorry. If we just endorse the Kitchener resolution, how do we include the additional pieces that Mr. Pomponi talked about?
You can, I would just add those two. If you would pass the motion, those two will be added in. We'll just get Mark to help us with the wording. So when I say endorse, I mean as amended.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Merlehan was passed it, and Councilor McMillan was second. All those in favor? And that is passed. Do we want to take action on any of the other ones before we move on? Oh, Mr. Brennan. Almost got your Councilor Brennan.
Yeah, I would highly recommend, you would have seen that the Township of Howick passed a motion regarding firefighter training, and there was correspondence endorsed through Municipality of Grey Highlands. I think with the closing of the fire college and the fact that, if you recall, when the Conservative government first took office, they actually put a temporary stop to some increased requirements on training that were going to be fairly expensive for the municipality. Rumor has it that that was only a deferral and that we probably are going to see those training requirements and increased costs come back in some way, shape, or form. So with those two statements, the closing of the fire college and the need for appropriate and cost-effective training, and the concerns that the provincial government may be proceeding with what the Ontario Fire Marshal's office had originally recommended, or some version of it, and the cost that that will be, I would recommend that council passes a resolution request for endorsement regarding the Township of Howick's original motion.
Okay. Councilor McMillan?
Sounds like something that's pretty serious and pretty hits us pretty close. What about if we ask staff to put together a recommendation that we could put on an agenda and move and second and pass as a council ourselves? Is that, or are you just looking for us to endorse their letter?
You know what, it's whatever council's pleasure is. I certainly could talk to Ann and Dale about having fire put together something, that would be our own, or if it's council's preference, I spoke tonight because I think Howick has hit the mark, in terms of what their ask is, but whatever council's pleasure is.
I'll move that we endorse Council of Howick, their letter, and write a letter of support and CC everybody concerned.
Just to make sure, we're talking about the Grey Highland resolution, just that one, or are we talking about both of them? The one from Hudson, the Township of Hudson as well. That's Firearms.
I believe, sorry, Councillor Shantz, I thought Howick was the original motion and Grey Highlands was just endorsing it, but
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll follow you now. Okay, thank you. Councilor Merlehan?
Yeah, through you. I'm okay endorsing, but I'd also, even if we just got a verbal update next week as to how this potentially impacts our fire department, I'd be curious on that. I know training, they've been doing some online stuff. I don't know how much they used this other area thing that they're closing down, but if there's any impact potential to us, then, I'd like to know about it now.
Okay. All right, so everybody in favor of that endorsement? Okay, thumbs up. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we have a public notice, a notice of intent to amend fees or charges for general service development and engineering. The Council of the Township of Woolwich gives notice of its intent to consider a bylaw to amend fees or charges for general services, development engineering, on April the 20th, 2021 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers situated at 24 Church Street, West in Elmira, and on Zoom and live streamed to the Township of Woolwich's YouTube channel. Notice of closed meetings, there are none. Notice of motion, none. So we have a special meeting after this one, but we have to adjourn this one first. So do I have a motion to adjourn and a seconder? Councilor Martin and Councilor Redikoff, all in favor? And that is passed. Mayor Shantz?
Thank you. So we're going to convene into a special council meeting. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councilor Merlehan?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, the 2.21, the bylaw to authorize amendments dealing with the community improvement plan. And I believe that's it, unless this one that says bylaw to confirm all proceedings of the council.
That's this, I think that's this meeting now, not the committee meeting. that we just finished, Val.
Oh, okay.
Mayor Shantz, he has, his pecuniary would be on item 2.2.1, 4.1, and items 1 and 2 on the summary of recommendations for Mill Street and the BIA signage grant resolution.
Oh, yes, thank you, Val.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks. Okay, then a motion to convene back into committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Shantz and Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. And let's do 1 and 2.1 first, and then we'll take care of the rest of them. So the summary of the recommendations of the committee of the whole be adopted, and we'll look at number 1, the closing Mill Street, and number 2.1, approve adding replacement or repair of signage. Actually, it's all of 2, is it not, Val?
Yeah, just go with all of 2.
1 and 2, the signage in the downtown BIA. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Reddecup, Councillor McMillan, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Come back, Councillor McMillan. Yep, Councillor Merlihan. Sorry.
How long is my hair gonna have to get before that stops?
We have to start using first names.
Yeah, that would be easier. Okay, we have tender of the structure replacement for Martin Grove, Glasgow Street South Bridge, the seasonal load limit restrictions, and the appointment of drainage superintendent. Would someone like to move those 4? Councillor Martin and Councillor Merlihan.
Yeah, can we pull number 5, the seasonal load limit?
Sure.
Just to have a couple more questions before we do that. Thanks.
3, 4, and 6. Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor Shantz, we're gonna pull 5. Can we pull 6? Can we just deal with them one at a time then? Or sorry.
Sure.
Sorry, Councillor Merlihan, sorry, I apologize. I thought it was 5. Sorry about that. I thought 5 was 6. Sorry,
okay.
my mistake.
So we're good with
Yeah.
drainage superintendent.
Yeah. We're good. My mistake.
Clear, we're voting on the replacement of Martin Grove, Glasgow Street South, and the appointment of the drainage superintendent. Okay, I think I had a mover and seconder on those. Yes, Val?
Didn't see one.
Okay, well, let's do Councillor Shantz and McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Seasonal load limit restrictions. Did someone want to discuss that a little more? Councillor Merlihan?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Shantz, to council, or actually not to council, to Mr. Poupé. I'm wondering if Mr. Poupé can give just a direct answer on the state of what's that street with the J? New Jerusalem. if the particular location where the farmer needs to get the silos up. Can you, from staff's perspective, I know the damage and all that, but if you had eyes on that particular piece of road, could you tell us, give us your opinion, I suppose, on that particular section of whether or not it would be able to withstand the full load of cement trucks?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, Councilor Merlihan, I cannot answer that. It's not an answerable question. I can't confirm the makeup. I can certainly tell council that it's not been designed to handle full half load season. I can tell you that. I can tell you that the inflicted damage based on what was in the reporting at 1% would be 5,000 per fully loaded truck. So if we took 30 trucks times 5,000, it's $150,000 in damage. I could state that, and all of that is subject, right? But so I cannot confirm or corroborate whether that road at this state in the game, because there may be lots of roads that could sustain full loads in our rural area, but I don't believe that to be a reasonable request of staff to pick and choose roads that are able to sustain full loads versus half loads during a by-lot half load season. I feel that that decision is fully with council personally.
Okay, so, you know, I moved the original motion and would continue to support that motion if staff actually had, you know, eyes on the road. And in this particular instance, this I do see as different than all of the others. And for the most part, I agree with the report in its entirety and how staff approached this particular subject. But in this instance, you know, you said that, you know, staff didn't really, you looked at the road, you know, a couple of weeks ago. I would be willing to make not the exemption outright, but to delegate to staff after, like, pass this, but delegate to staff on this particular location if they could support it or not. And if they come to the conclusion that, yeah, this road has still got issues and we don't, whatever, then I would be 100% supportive of that. But you're telling me that you've had no staff eyes on the road or anything, and if that could happen, if council supported, you know, somebody drives out, two people drive out, take a look at the road. If you give it the okay that it's good to go, then approve it at a staff level and we delegate, or the other way. We don't think it's good enough. We're not going to risk it. And I would support either 100%. But just having that additional look would make me feel better. I did receive an email from Mr. Fry. He's not, you know, super happy with me, and I understand that. But he's saying that he's going to have to run 120 cement trucks down the road at half load, and I think, you know, it would be worth a second or a first look, I suppose, from a staff level. Is that a fair ask?
Through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Merlehan, staff, so just for clarity, I personally did not review the road. Staff have visited New Jerusalem Road on the tour. I was only there for a portion of the tour, so I did not make New Jerusalem Road, but staff have visited that. So we did have eyes on the road. I don't know that it's a fair ask to put this in staff's court to subsidize a landowner of known damage. I mean, what it looks like on the surface may not mean what it can support underneath. There's an investigation, it's complex. So it may look well on the surface, it may handle a truck or two, I don't know. I mean, but will it handle 40 fully loaded trucks? Because that's 16 times the damage of 120 trucks. We need to put that in perspective. Half loaded truck, I would take 120 half loaded trucks over 40 fully loaded trucks. I would do that. I would say that's why the bylaw is enacted. It is there to protect the road system. It's unfortunate. I appreciate the situation to some degree. I don't know the full story, but from what at least has been shared publicly, it is a difficult situation. You do have somebody's livelihood that is affected. I don't know the time frames or how we got to this point, but certainly can state that this half load situation is not new. And I know that there was a moving of the structure that certainly we weren't involved in. So if this is to staff, I guess if I'm open and transparent at this very moment in time, I can't recommend it during the half load. And I feel that any exemptions fall to council. The staff report stands. We feel very strongly about that. We wouldn't look to provide any exemptions because, simply put, it is from a staff perspective, we are simply allowing a subsidization for one property owner on the backs of many ratepayers. And I don't believe that's an appropriate place for staff to be, unless we can do that for all property owners. then I think that that's, maybe more appropriate in the staff, in the staff's wheelhouse. But I think that's a very difficult thing to ask a staff, and I would default back to council for the exemption.
Okay, if I could just have a quick follow-up. So the magical date of April 30th is not that far away. So as soon as that date hits, you're happy the trucks could go? I mean, we talk about weather being different, the weather patterns from year to year, and then different areas of the township. I don't believe, if I recall, that stretch of road, it's kind of wide open. But I don't know. You're very married to April 30th as being the, this line for the last 39 years that Woolwich Township has had an enacted and enforces bylaw. Is there zero wiggle room, I suppose, in that timeline?
Through Mayor Shonskin to Councillor Merlehan, I think that that's the bylaw we have. That's what we work with, and that's why staff is recommending that we return with a report to council that beefs up essentially the bylaw and allows us some more flexibility with respect to the season and that load restriction. It is not perfect, but staff would certainly follow along the bylaw, and then certainly at May 1st, it is trucks are going wherever they need to be. So the exemption, again, that request, I believe, needs to be dealt with by council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Shantz and then Martin.
Thank you. I received that same email, and it was also talking about dust in the fields when because the farmers have been on the fields for a couple of weeks already, or a period of time. My question to Mr. Papay is, I understand that when a road would be clear over the winter and frost in the ground, driving over it pounds of frost deeper in the ground than if it's covered with snow like a field. And so I guess I would discount that information as far as relating the frost in the road compared to a frost in the field, because the field was covered with snow, not driven over, and the road was bare and driven over, which drives the frost lower into the ground. Am I correct on that, Mr. Papay?
Through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Shantz, I would agree with that statement.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Let me bring a little perspective to this matter. This barn burned down 9 months ago, minus 2 weeks. They've had ample time to get concrete in for silos because they knew from the beginning that they were going to move them because they were going to move the barn. The foundation for the barn's there and a lot of it's framed. So by not having the concrete in for their silos now was probably just poor management on their part.
Okay. Anything else? There is a recommendation there if someone would like to move it or not. Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? No, wait a minute. Sorry, Councillor Merlehan.
Yeah, thank you. Through you. Right now, I'll probably continue to support the seasonal load limit on this. I was really hoping that maybe council would ask staff. I know Mr. Poupé says it's not a fair ask, but I think if we had some eyes on the road that looked at this piece of road just one time, and if it was a no-go, I 100% support staff's decision either way. If we could make an exemption just on this one, just based on, I wouldn't call it poor management. It's been a rough year for everybody, and 9 months to get a silo when you're in COVID times, and I imagine getting a contractor hasn't been that easy because it's not hard. If you need to get your shower redone or anything like that, it's difficult. So I wouldn't chalk it up to that. But I mean, my ask is just eyes on the road, and if staff decide, and they can decide if it's not worth the risk, then I would support that. Would anybody support that?
Councillor Shantz wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I don't think that's fair to ask staff for that because eyes on the road are different than eyes in the road. And we don't know what's below the surface. And I don't think it's fair to have staff make that judgment because if something goes wrong, who's going to be blamed for it? And I think that's not putting the proper onus on the staff. If we want to make that decision as a council and take the chance, then I think we make the decision. But I don't think it's fair to ask staff to make that decision. They made the recommendation on what they know. I know April 30th is a drop dead date, but I guess if damage happens after on May the 1st, then we take the responsibility. That's my opinion.
Councillor McMillan?
Yeah, just a question. I understand Mr. Poupet's concern about staff time and running around and checking every mile of road that we have throughout the township every spring. That's completely unreasonable. Is his concern that this is going to be a regular occurrence and every year we're going to have 10 projects that we're sending staff out to? Or is the concern that it's impossible to tell that the frost is out of the road? Because I think that there's reason to be concerned that this becomes a regular occurrence and happens a lot. But are you even able to tell, April 28th versus May 3rd whether the frost is out of the road or not?
Through Mayor Shantz, Councilor McMillan, I would say it's all of the above. I think the concern is obviously we've received 7 exemption requests this year when our neighbors have received 0. I think that's a concern. Obviously, there is a concerted effort in Woolwich to continue this. It is unfortunate if Mr. Fry is caught up in that and it's all above board and everything is as stated. That is an unfortunate circumstance. But again, I think that I don't want to set up any false expectations. If council's asking staff to go look at the road, I don't believe I need to. I think I can simply state that that precedent is not one that staff wants to set. I think that the precedent that was highlighted in the report was a council precedent, not a staff precedent. And I think that's where it should be. And I strongly believe because of our road network and our asset management staff are providing their professional opinion that we have an underfunded system. And any exemption is going to make us go backwards, not forwards, with regards to appropriate funding on our road networks. Trucks damage roads in all seasons. In all seasons. That's a statement for sure. It's not cars. Cars do not damage roadways. It is heavy equipment, and they are their most susceptible during these times. And the bylaw is crafted in such a way that I don't believe it provides flexibility for staff. It is a council flexibility, and staff are looking to bolster the bylaw, not to shrink it, as was stated in the report. So that's what I would offer at this point.
Councillor Rohan.
Yeah, through you, general comments. I don't think any of these ones are some elaborate scheme to, hoodwink the dumb old councillors on Woolwich Council, because, the cement companies, wrote a report in 2013. And if that's happening, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Lots of associations, put out playbooks for how to deal with certain things. That's nothing new there. I don't think, Woolwich being mentioned is us being targeted either. If council or if staff is unwilling to take a look at one road this year, why are we looking for a report where we're going to delegate these duties to staff? If that report comes back and it's like all of a sudden, oh, well, we don't really have any staff that are able to make that assessment of whether or not the road is good 2 weeks before, are we going to have to bring in specialized people, more staff? That's another concern here. I think this is just, one of those situations where you have somebody that had an unfortunate event with the barn, and nobody is disputing that the cement trucks, the big heavy trucks on roads are wrecking them. Like that's not in dispute at all. But this is just maybe You know, we have a person that does road patrol. I don't know if they go down New Jerusalem Road, but they do road patrol every day that to see what the conditions of the roads are in various parts. I would think, you know, a little bit of an assessment. I mean, I'm no roads expert, but if the road's wet, I can tell you, oh, it's really wet and squishy when I drive. You know, that would be enough for me to say, yeah, no. So if there's such an unwillingness because you know, it doesn't want to be on staff, then why are we asking for a report then for staff to come back later to delegate this responsibility from council to staff if they won't make an assessment?
I agree with what you're saying, Councillor Murley, and if staff isn't willing to make that kind of a judgment call, then people are just going to come back to council anyway. So that's no change to the current situation. We have a bylaw in place now. I think staff can take a look at the bylaw and make recommendations to change the bylaw, but we can certainly talk about that when we look at that bylaw.
Okay.
For tonight, staff is saying they don't agree with allowing an exemption here. It's up to council. Councillor Martin, is your hand up?
Yes, it is.
Go
We
ahead.
spent time on this issue. I guess the first thing I'd ask is anybody listening to me, how many of you went and checked some of our gravel roads in the last 2 weeks? I can assure you probably nobody. Secondly, the roads drive from the top down, not from the bottom up. And if you would look at that road that I mentioned where there's a big problem where tow trucks are pulling cars out of the road, I can guarantee if you dig down 6 inches or a foot, it should be pretty wet. So I think that top surface of the road, you can look at it and say, yeah, it's dry. It should be, but it's not, it's far from firm. And ask Chair, is that a fair submission?
Okay, I think we've been all the way through that, and I think we've talked about that, and I think that's what Jared has said to us as well. There is a motion on the floor. You guys ready to call a question? Yeah, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving on to readings of the bylaw. A motion that the following bylaws be introduced and read a first and second time. And that is the community improvement plan, the drainage superintendent, and all actions of council from tonight. Moved by Councillor McMillan, second by Councillor Redekop. Sorry, Val, do we have to pull some of those out?
Just the first one, 2.2.1.
Okay, everything except 2.2.1. All those in favor? And that's carried.
I can vote for that one? Yeah, okay.
And 2.2.1 then, moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Redekop. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. A motion that the Committee of the Whole rise and report to Council, moved by Councillor McMillan and Shantz. All those in favor? It's carried. Motion that the Council confirms and adopts proceedings of Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Redekop and Merlihan. All those in favor? That's carried. Motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a third time and that they be finally numbered as bylaws number 27-2021 to 29-2021, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with the corporate seal. We'll do all except for 2.2.1. Moved by Councillor Martin and Sean. So all those in favor? That's carried. And then 2.2.1. Moved by Councillor Redekop and Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And I think that comes to the end. We'll have a motion to adjourn to meet again in regular session next Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. In closing, just a thank you to everyone who participated tonight and stuck with us through all of this. Please join us again next Tuesday on our YouTube live stream for our next council meeting. Council members and staff, I remind you to stay connected on Zoom till we receive confirmation that the live stream has stopped. Good night, everyone.